number 4 of our wheeling technical training. I'm hoping you've been with us since day one. If you just joined us today, all the best. But we've got an interesting day coming up. But like how we've started all our days, we started off with a quiz just to make sure we have an understanding of the previous day's content. And are you guys unable to hear me? I see Chris is saying there's no sound on his side. Are you guys unable to hear me?
I can hear you, no problem.
I can also hear.
Okay. Mr. Chris, maybe the sound issues on your side. But as I was saying, today promises to be interesting. I'll go, of course, through the agenda in a bit. But for now, let's try and complete the quiz. It's on the chat. Let me reshare it again. Just copy link, paste. There we go. Just pasted the link on the chat. And then we do that for a couple of minutes, let's say 5 or so minutes. Then we look at the quiz questions, and then we see what we have in store for this morning. Yes, I saw your hand. Please feel free to ask your question. Oh, it's okay. It's a safe space. Please ask your question. All right. Maybe type it if you don't want to unmute yourself. Once again, colleagues, good morning. Welcome to day number 4 of our NECOM technical wheeling training. Thank you for being with us for the entire 4 days. And if you have just joined us, today I've got news for you, but happy that you are here nonetheless. I've pasted a link to the quiz on the chat. Kindly complete it in the next few minutes. Then we'll just look at the questions, and then we will get into today. Right. I said if we get to 100 participants, I'll be very impressed, considering it is Friday, but we are at 72. And that is making me quite happy. Responses 11 on the quiz. We've got 12 responses. I'm seeing we're averaging 6.85 out of 9 points. We're not doing too bad. So that's 14 people. I'm hoping the rest, the next 15 or so colleagues, we move that average up. I'm hoping. If you just joined us, colleagues, we are doing what we do every morning, completing a quiz, touching on the previous day's content, and then after that, we get into today's work. Today promises to be an interesting day, of course. You will see on the lineup, it's like a very famous, what can I say? A very famous event started lineup. Colleagues, some housekeeping rules. Kindly mute your mics at all times, unless like there's something urgent that you want to, there's an urgent input you want to provide, but I would prefer we keep our mics muted. And generally, if you want to ask questions, we use the chat, or we just raise our hands and I will recognize you, or my colleagues will do so. All right. 18 responses. We are at 9:05. we had a hard start at 9:15. So I'm going to see if we can get to 25 responses. So I'm challenging your colleagues to answer with your eyes closed. I'm kidding. If you just joined us, welcome. There's 79 of us this morning. But what I'm seeing, the average, we're averaging now 7 out of 9. This is great. This is great. Meaning the next 5 colleagues will surely take, we're back to 6.95. When we get to 25, I'm hoping we are at 7.5 out of 9 points. Nick, are you around?
I am around.
Excellent. Do you think we should go to 25 responses?
Yeah, 25 sounds like a good one.
Cool, man. We're almost there. Number 21, you've taken our group average down. So colleagues, as you complete, of course, the questions, what I'm seeing here, a frequently missed question is which of these is not an option for generators connected to the municipal grid? I'm sure probably this is what challenged the colleagues when the question was which of these is not an option. But we'll get to that question soon. All right, excellent. We've got 26 responses. We're averaging a good 7 out of 9 points out of 27, so that's excellent. It seems there's one question that's been a challenge to everyone. We'll get into it as I scroll down below. But thank you for indulging me and participating. Let's get to the question. So the first question was, which of these is not an option for generators connected to the grid? Remember, that was Shirley's first presentation. And of course, all of these are options except the option none of the above. All right, so all of these are options. You export surplus, you wheel it, or you sell it, or you get credited, or you don't export, right? And then the second question, for a Muni connected generator, can NECOM disallow new connections based on transmission network capacity constraints? You remember, colleagues, in my presentation, we had that lengthy discussion where we all find out that NECOM could, in fact, limit grid connections downstream if it's connected in a network or zone with a transmission that is constrained. Why? Because in the case that the customer or the end user, right, or the off-taker, let's say they shut down, then all of that power from that generator can find its way back upstream, right? And if already your hosting capacity upstream is very limited, that injection of power may cause some power disturbances, all right? Very rare case, but of course, very much possible. It was a lengthy discussion in my presentation. And then this question is from France's presentation. Extract transform load process is a foundational data integration technique where raw data is extracted from various sources, right? So when you extract data from various sources, you're extracting from metering, then you transform it into consistent and usable format, right? So you are now going to a metering data management system. You take the meter from the data, then you go to the meter data management system. So that's why I then said the correct answer. This is the value of AMR meter, a meter coupled with a meter data management system to then interpret that data and create the necessary bills. Okay, so what are some challenges to ensuring technical compliance for generators in Munich? This was also from my presentations. I said select one, right? So what are some challenges? Of course, all of these are challenges. We've got a shortage of technical knowledge when it comes to these technologies. These technologies need power system simulation tools to do them internally. And then sometimes when we do these studies, we need some minimal data to inform these studies. All right, so all of those are correct. Accurate billing of a customer requires input data from metering. Aha. I'm happy. All of us agree. All right. Which one of the following is not an important stakeholder in data sharing for billing purposes within a municipality? Which one is not an important stakeholder? Of course, landscaping, colleagues, is not an important stakeholder. We haven't mentioned landscaping at any moment in our training, right? It's finance, technical engineering, and customer. Which of the following best describes the NECOM billing process? If you remember Keith's presentation, he mentioned that, of course, the metering itself is automated, but to then do the reconciliation, then there's some manual intervention. So it's semi-automated. All right. They've got plans to go fully automated, but at this stage, it's quite semi-automated. Which of these is not required for billing reconciliation? Of course, this is from Keith's presentation again. Aerial photography, colleagues. Aerial photography, there is nowhere where aerial photography goes in, is involved when it comes to billing reconciliation. So the correct answers is, what is required? Alignment of billing periods. The metering data is required. And then once you've metered the data, you allocate it to, it's either you allocate it to your different off-takers and you allocate it by time of use. All right. How would you rate your understanding of day 3 content? So I don't have any points for these questions. So it seems to me that a significant portion of our colleagues are very clear when it comes to technical requirements. And there's a significant number also, almost equal, some colleagues that are in between. But what is nice is that there's only minimal colleagues that are unclear, and it seems they are willing to watch the training videos again. So Nick, please reshare those training videos. When it comes to metering, there's clarity there. And of course, there's still a significant number who are in between, minimal, unclear. And then when it comes to billing recon, we start to see our graph shift a bit. Billing recon is complex, if I do have to say so myself. But it seems that a lot of us are still somewhere in between. Hence, you will hear later on Megan when Megan tells you colleagues that post their training for the next 2 weeks, you have a chance to work on your tool, then you send it to myself and Nick, and then we can look at you. And I'm hoping that billing recon process post the training will try and sort this out. All right. How are you feeling this Friday morning? Aha. Most of us are feeling good. And some of us are feeling great. It seems none of us have had better days. So this is the best day you've had. But anyway, colleagues, we need to get started now. I'm hoping that quiz was useful. So let me get to the business of the day quickly. Do I have the right presentation? Yeah, right. Slideshow from current slide. There we go. Once again, if you just joined us, colleagues, we are 4 from 100, but I'm hoping colleagues come. Good morning, colleagues. We have an interesting lineup today of some interesting speakers where they will focus a lot on municipal wheeling implementation case studies, right? And then there'll be a session later where, now that we are completing the training, what are the step-by-step processes that we need to undertake to ensure wheeling is a success in our individual municipality? So the colleagues will provide guidance there, right? So that's how we've broken up our day. And of course, there'll be a session that brings to us the private sector industry perspective, because of course, we are all a community in this space. That is customers, private sector, public sector, and we're all trying to enable private generation. But for now, we've got Mr. Bongani Mandla, who's going to come in and just share his own experiences on what it takes, to implement wheeling in a municipality, and the journey that a municipality should ideally take, and the journey that, in his experience, in the work that he's done, the journey that he's taken. Some colleagues might know that he was previously at George Municipality, but of course he's moved on now, but he still brings a wealth of knowledge in terms of unlocking this within the municipality. All right, then after him, we'll have Courtney, and he will speak really to the City of Cape Town billing reconciliation and wheeling approach. You will realize, of course, it's quite detailed, and it is usually what I say where all of us aspire to be. But of course, he'll get into a bit more detail there. All right, is Mr. Mandla on the call? Bongani, are you on the call?
Yes, Chair, I'm here. Not sure if you can see my hand.
My apologies. All right, I think, Nick, you're going to share on your side. You're going to share Bongani's presentation, and then he'll take it from there. Welcome, Bongani, and good morning, everyone.
All right, good morning, Chair, and good morning to the colleagues online. I trust you had a very fruitful as well as very engaging session with the training. I think mine input is just to share a bit of a journey that we traveled with the George colleagues, and I hope and trust some are online. Maybe they could also even add more in-depth, detailed inputs around some of the work that they've done to ensure that the pilot was eventually implemented and track in terms of how that progress has gone. So today is to share how the George municipality, in terms of its journey, while we were there, actually transversed around this aspect. So as Sina was indicated, my name is Bongani Mandla. I am a former director from the George municipality, and I'm currently now working for NECOM. If we go to the next slide, Chair, I'll share some of the particular implements and the reasons why the municipality and its leadership at a time.
Sorry to interrupt. Can everybody see the PowerPoint? I'm failing to see it, but it may just be me.
We can see it.
Okay, let me log in and out again. Thanks.
All right, may I continue?
Yes, sure, Bongani.
All right, no, thank you, Chair. So I think part of the leadership at the time, one of the objectives and drivers to allow wheeling as a service, particularly for the George municipality and the George customers, was to ensure that we are able to provide a better service to the customers, knowing that the energy landscape is changing. There's a competitiveness that's coming through with embedded generation coming through. And we were saying in this space, how then do we ensure that we are also playing within this market by reducing the cost of our purchase cost, by allowing our customers to also have an opportunity to procure energy at a generator. And for that generator, we actually looked at two scenarios, one being focusing at generators that could also be local to the George area, which would then be besides stimulating economic development, it would also allow for quicker connection in terms of the generation to the grid, as well as accelerate what we believed was a critical renewable energy adoption in drive towards our climate change. So this was the one factor, Chair, that we looked at. The second one was to ensure that we are able to, if we go press, Nick, are able to keep our customers connected to the grid, ensuring that we drive the scenario of a grid for all. So if our customers are connected to the grid and the grid is working as a municipality, that becomes our diamond. It becomes what we use to then be able to generate our revenue streams, but ensuring that while we secure revenue, we remain revenue neutral to an extent. We are able to scale up and allow for customers to get the benefit. And the third one was to ensure that there's a sustainable as well as an adaptable business model, where, as I've indicated earlier, to incentivize the correct economic drivers, because the intention was to say, how do we, as a municipality, incentivize economic drivers, particularly within our space as a start. Secondly, we looked at the low risk, because this energy now was going to be wheeled from a different generator. You'll recall at the time, there was also an excessive amount of load shedding. So we then said it's also critical that as a municipality, we look at how do we drive our energy resilience by looking at various ways of getting energy into our grid, some of that energy to be wheeled through what we call independent power producers, some of that energy to be done as own built through the generations within the grid by the municipality, as well as also allowing wheeling of energy from generation directly to municipal customers. So this was critical for us, as well as it was going to drive what we call ring fencing of the municipal electric department. If we go to the next slide, Chair, this slide then talks to the journey that was undertaken by the municipality. And this journey started way before even myself was appointed as a director, to show that the intentions and the drive of the municipalities was there, just the previous slide. And this was to say, how do we then start this willing journey? And that journey was started by saying, first and foremost, between the municipality, let them identify and have what we call a willing business case, to say, is there a case for willing as a service to be arranged and to be provided? This was then taken through council, for council to allow for introduction of willing as a service, introduction of a willing tariff, and this was then taken through what we call public participation, where the public had an opportunity to participate on the guidelines that have been drafted to introduce this service, to give their inputs around what they foresee this service will deliver for the municipality and how they would prefer that this service is then offered. I think around December 2020, the council then approved the willing as a service for the municipality. The willing tariff was then applied for during the NERSA application process. Willing tariff was approved by NERSA at the time. I know in subsequent years, I think we received feedback that NERSA had no framework to approve, but at the time that willing tariff was approved, the first use of systems was then signed in July 2021 to say this is the use of systems that will then be operatable during this transaction. But you can see from 1st July 2021 up until May 2022, which is almost a year, it is when now the practical steps of how this will be literally and practically implemented was then done. I think there was hard sweat and tears from some of the colleagues, I think in the engineering space where Mr. Wilken was involved, I think in the planning space where the likes of Philip and I think Mr. Greef was also involved at the time. and these environments then brought together the ensuring that we're able to move to the space of having the first transaction. And it was envisioned that the second use of systems will then be signed in July 2023. And from there, the key issues was to say we then need to scale this service. And part of scaling the service required that the billing is actually done in a more non-manual, more automated aspect, which then led to some other discussions and opportunities that needed to be considered. And secondly, it also talked to say we then need to look at this application process for use of systems, because for the first one, we had the benefit of even the trader assisting with the legalities in drawing up those contracts. So it was a matter of saying, how then do we standardize the use of systems application processes to make it easier for municipalities to be able to support and sign these use of systems. So this is just the process, Chair, that it took to get to a point of having the first transaction, and the plans in terms of how then to allow the framework to scale this up going forward. If we go to the next slide. The next slide will then talk to the process in terms of how the George municipality then introduced what we call a renewable energy strategy and a renewable energy policy. That actually explained for specific categories, for argument's sake, where you've got generation and connection policies to say for above 1 megawatt, we are saying off-takers options for above 1 megawatt should be either through will or have a power purchase agreement, and then that will then wheeling will be connected to either the wheeling guidelines or the IPPs within that space. Within the 100 kilowatts between and lower than 1 megawatts, there are various off-taker options that were put on the table. One through the embedded generation, which is through your SSEGs, or having a wheeling agreement or power purchase agreement. So these were then to be specific off-takers that will be then determined by the specific connection requirements. And obviously, where it was below 100 kilowatt at the time, the policy then said the off-takers should then be limited to SSEGs. So you could see that wheeling did play a framework, but in particularly focused between above 100 kilowatts and more than 1 megawatts. If we go to the next slide, Chair, which will then tell us around what are some of the things that at the time we had learned and that could actually be useful for the rest of the colleagues online that are also going through the journey, that have started this journey, so that we can talk to some of those elements. So what we learned was that at the time, wheeling was then very much feasible, one, from a municipality, because of how we structured the wheeling tariff. Then the municipality would remain what we call revenue neutral, because the difference in terms of how we set this up was to say the purchase cost that we used to buy, if we were buying for 1 rand and we were selling for 150, we need to ensure that that 50 cent that used to be what we gain as a profit margin, we still retain that by ensuring that then the competition is between what we used to purchase and what the customer is purchasing from the generator. And the difference then should make sure that as a municipality, we remain revenue neutral on those specific connection points. We also said for the off-takers, it gave them options in terms of being able to procure energy from a renewable source if they needed to have green tokens or green credits or confirmation. This process allowed for them to be able to procure at a lower tariff as well if the generator or the IPP would then sell lower than what the municipality would have procured from its wholesaler. Then the last one is that for the generator, it was feasible, albeit obviously they would want for a bit more leniency, but I think it was also feasible to them. Sorry? All right. And then the learnings on the contractual aspect is that these are some of the contractual things that needed to be in place. One, the use of systems agreement that we talked about between the municipality and the wheeler, who's going to be, it could be the trader or the generator. Two, the amended supply agreement. This is now between the municipality and the off-taker, the customer. And then three, the generating connection agreement. This is now for generators that are embedded within the municipal networks. So those are some of the learnings and some of the hard works that the colleagues there needed to unpack and discuss. And I think the last point, Chair, if you to move, we'll then talk to the fundamental aspects of the learnings around the billing process, because at this stage, remember with this willing introduction, at the point with around about 4 off-takers, it meant then the bills needed to be manually adjusted to allow for the credits and so forth. So one could see that this can be a bit of a tedious exercise. It can be an exercise that is also labor intensive, especially if one looks at how to scale those up. So we learned that we needed to look at how can we look at ways of automating that. And I think through the likes of, I think Derek at the time and the colleagues, we needed to then look at what can be done for us to automate that space. If you go to the next slide, Chair. So this slide then talks to what are some of the challenges that we picked up at that stage. So as I've indicated, one is paving this uncharted road. One, at the time, there was not a lot of expertise in the space, but we had commitment from teams that were resilient, that actually said they needed to find solutions rather than complain around what is not in place. So I really take my hat off for the colleagues there. Yes, there were insufficient resources. I think some of the colleagues spent sleepless nights, getting this into place because they wanted to drive and make sure that we can actually have this framework in place. We can actually have a successful pilot as a municipality. There was no standardized contracts. I recall there were months where we would even struggle internally as a municipality with our own legal teams, just interpreting some of this, because this was now a new way. And that unfortunately caused a lot of iterations between the legal and our technical guys, and we have no framework to fall onto. So there is something else that was a challenge from a municipal capacity point of view. The billing itself, the fact that it was manual, how we needed to do the allocations of the credits and so forth. And this is something that needed us to look at how we embed in terms of before we can scale up. The next element was around the cost reflectiveness of the tariff. So one, the municipality had already completed a sort of a cost of supply study in 2019 that was approved. I think it was amongst the first to be approved by NERSA. So, and then at the same time, we're going through a process of implementing the phase of that cost reflective restructuring. And obviously, this came with the unbundling of the network cost from the energy cost, the fixed versus the variable cost. And that in itself was labor intensive and required a lot of focus from the teams, while also on the same side, we are driving this pilot. So this re-emphasizes the element of the municipal capacity constraints. But the good part is that the colleagues understood that, we have a drive to secure and grow our revenue base we have a drive to ensure that we do not lose customers from the grid because of energy being expensive. And this was one of the levers, not the only lever, but one of the levers that could allow that cost reduction. And as a result, I think the colleagues had it within them to drive and ensure that we spend sleepless nights to get this across the board. So in the next slide, Chair, we also solicited some support from various areas to complement and further give inputs to the work that was being done, so that this was not done as an isolation. I hope we are moving to the next slide. I think there's a bit of a delay.
Yes, Bongani, I think there is a slight delay coming through. I hope everyone can see it. It's wheeling with the George network, is that right?
Yes, so I think it's coming through. Let me. So there's a bit of a delay, yes. So then the action plan was to say, now that we've learned this, now that the colleagues have put sweat and blood to get certain things in place, how do we systematically ensure that this is then, developed and grown further? Besides talking about it, presenting, how do we ensure that we allow for it to move much better? So one of the key things with the wheeling with generators that will be embedded in the George network was to ensure that there's a standardized use of system agreements. I think that was the work that was done. I think the colleagues worked with the Western Cape government as well in terms of driving some of those frameworks. And there were some frameworks and contracts standardized that were produced as a result of that. Automation of billing systems. There was a process where I think one of the suppliers supported us. Is it Open Access or Open Energy? I don't recall the name quite well now, but they assisted us in terms of driving that process of automating the bill. And I think the only challenge was, the final integration with the financial systems, which I would believe that the colleagues had addressed that. But at the time, it was able to take the energy, do the allocation seamlessly, and then move this through to the final step where the financial will then confirm if the pre-populated bill is accurate, and then they will be able to send it forward. What we then understood is to say, for wheeling to be sustainable, we need to ensure that the grid then remains in an impeccable manner, strong to deliver the energy. So there was significant progress driven by our planning department to ensure that we refurbish, we strengthen our grid, and in so doing, it will then allow for even future generators and even IPPs to be able to connect, which will then allow for even more of taking opportunities. The tariff restructuring, where we are doing the unbundling, that started as well, and it was in the process of then being rolled out, but in a phased way, because it also had some minor challenges in its initial implementation. But the key was to say we need to unbundle the tariff so that we are able to then obviously protect the municipal revenue. One of the key challenges in wheeling via the ESCOM networks at the time was the fact that when you change a supply agreement, they then would trigger what we call security deposits. And this was very critical because it moved from a culture of municipalities not honoring their bills, municipalities not paying for their current and even overdue debt. So this was a critical point from ESCOM to say, before you then change your supply agreement to something else, ensure that you've got security deposits in place. As a municipality at the point, this meant that there was about 200 million worth of guarantees of payment that would need to be in place to be able to allow for that wheeling through that. And there was a discussion to say, can there be a consideration for good standing municipalities to be exempted? At this stage, I don't believe that discussion has yielded any fruits, given the state of municipalities not honoring their bills currently. And then the last one was to say the applicable use of systems cost. Use of system cost to include the HV sort of network cost. So these were some of the costs that will be added now, because besides the municipal wheeling cost, there'll be another wheeling cost that will be required if an IPP is wheeling via ESCOM and then wheeling through the municipality into your municipal customer. So those were some of the things that needed to be finalized. And I think, Chair, that should then conclude some of the work that during the period was done within the George, as I've indicated. It was a lot of good work done by the teams, and some of that work resulted in significant improved issues around metering systems and the billing systems and the automated billing systems, which in itself created efficiencies. And generally in the past, when I talked to this point, I used to say, what is very important when we introduce these systems is also taking the people with us, because the people need to understand that the introduction of these billing systems or automated systems should not be seen as a means of replacing them. There'll always be a need for our metering specialists to interrogate and make sure that whatever our systems are doing are actually a true reflection. So it's very important that from a leadership perspective, we also take our people with us through that. And then from capacity constraints, as much as we are able to contract services from specialists, but it's also important to partner. And I think in this case, we partnered with the likes of CE, with the likes of the Western Cape government, did that. I think Johan from Green Cape, some colleagues from SALGA, AMU, and various other partners. But in the main, we also had a drive from all the deputy directors who led their teams to ensure that this becomes a critical element. And I also do want to acknowledge, I think, the likes of the political leadership as well as the municipal leadership, because with those two aligned, it makes these things much better. And because of that, there was a huge drive, I think, in the George municipality to drive for maximizing automation, digitalization in its efforts to become a smart city. And this was one of the elements that needed to be in place to confirm that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mandla. That was an excellent input, as always, of course. But I think the most important thing on my side is that pretty much your process that you've outlined is the process that we've been trying to get across to the colleagues throughout the past couple of days, and it's good to see it in practice, if I may say, right? One thing, as I open up the floor for questions, Mr. Mandla, is, of course, municipalities have certain concerns around wheeling itself, which I would think also maybe at some point you also had similar concerns. So I want them to bring up those concerns, and then maybe you can assist in your response to them. George, let's start with you, sir.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mandla. Thanks for your presentation. It's well received. And yeah, I think maybe just from the other smaller municipalities, just some side note. It's good to see the process, but I think we might get stuck in implementing without knowing some of the intricacies of that implementation plan. So in other words, more detail. But that's just the little hurdle that we need to get across. I was thinking maybe to arrange a visit with George Municipality and, engaging those stakeholders and going to see for ourselves, taking our billing people with, and to see how we can learn from what you've paved the way, so we can just learn from that and implement accordingly. But yeah, definitely the process, as Anawa also mentioned, the process is what we're also learning now. The steps to get there, I think it's just coloring in the detail. And with that, I would just like to maybe ask two questions, if I may. The first one is regarding generators and traders. wanting your large customer information. In other words, should the municipality be involved in linking traders and generators with its own bigger customers? That's, I know, maybe a very controversial, some guys will say yes up, because it could be to the benefit of the municipality, but, it's to the benefit of your wheeling program, but not necessarily. Yeah, we can maybe discuss that one a bit. And then my second question is regarding bulk infrastructure contributions for generators that connect to the municipal network. If a new development or a new load gets connected, they need to pay these bills. Question is, if a generator connects and wants to wheel, are we going to charge them the same as well, these infrastructure charges, bulk infrastructure charges? Thank you, sir.
Over to you, Mr. Andla.
All right. No, thank you, Chair. So I think maybe let me start with the first one. I think I've just browsed. I think I do see some familiar names. So I think in terms of the expertise, George, definitely, I think you can touch base with the likes of, I think, Kobus, Wilken, Danich, and I think Apiwa, or the director within the George municipality. They would be able to, to look at those intricacies and share some of both the frustrations from their side as well as some of the challenges and how they managed to overcome some of the issues that were lying along the way, because they definitely overcame that in delivering the pilot. So I think those are be critical people to talk to on that. In terms of the generators and facilitating the intake. So the question would be, if your large power users require this service or are looking for this service, you are the go-to person for them. And I think the pain point for most of the large power users will be around the fact that the electricity cost is a huge input cost to their generation. And as a result, some of them are scaling down in job creation in some of the activities within your areas that will have a ripple effect on your operation and sustainability as a municipality. So I think the question that one will have to look at is to say, are the products that you as a municipality are already looking to solve some of the colleagues or the large power users needs, if there's a need for them to, I don't know what is your power base, if they're in the export market, there's a cross-border adjustment, and this is going to hit, you've got some agricultural customers that are in the export and they need to prove that a certain percentage of their product is being, manufactured or it's being grown using renewable or clean energy. And if they don't do that, they get some penalties. And if we don't do something for them, they will do something for themselves, and others are forced to, even build expensive off-grid solutions. And we are saying you do still want these customers to connect to your grid so that you are able to get the revenue from the services. But if your grid services, you are able to get revenue from the grid services, and if you then do not have any alternatives that you are providing, for argument's sake, you are not building your own renewable energy plants in terms of your own builds, you have not, requested or contracted with NECOM for renewable energy when those products are available, and you are not producing anything to them. You are then leaving them out there to find solutions for themselves. So facilitating a platform where they are able to meet stakeholders that could actually address the energy cost from a renewable aspect or clean energy need. It's something that I think is proactive from municipality, but it's important that you are able to then recover your cost through properly assigned and calculated use of systems agreement. Because the reality is true that if you don't do anything, they will definitely do something on their side. They'll install their even own PV systems, which they need to connect. So if you don't have a framework even for embedded generation, it creates another hurdle. for those customers. So the intention here is that as a licensed distributor, we need to be in the forefront of providing these solutions to our customers and looking for means to meet their own need. For argument's sake, as we speak, besides generators that will come and build, there's IPPs. I think today, if you talk to some of the customers, even NECOM is providing some green energy solutions that can be a suite of products that can be shared with these large power customers so that you don't lose them as the municipalities. I think that is just one, but obviously you need to look at the context, you need to look at the impact, but if you don't do anything, the risk is that slowly but surely they'll find solutions for themselves and they'll either go off grid or start shutting down or move to places where they can operate more efficiently as a company. So it is a risk-based analysis that you need to take, but I do argue for allowing those opportunities to be shared with the customers. So for bulk infrastructure, definitely yes, and I think maybe Mr. Greef is also online. He can maybe give further context to that if needed. But if there's no bulk infrastructure connected or built in that area and they need that to be done, they will also need to pay for those upgrades, because now it's been upgraded for them to be able to connect and wheel energy. So they should not necessarily be treated differently from a developer. So that there will be the point of departure from where I am, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Bongani. I hope you sorted, George. I'm going to allow one last question from Chris. If you have any more questions for Bongani colleagues, please paste them on the chat and we'll try to get them answered. Right. All right, over to you, Chris.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Bongani. Sorry, man, I missed some of the presentation. I was having problems with my comms, but I'm back online now. I was just following up on a question from George, and he said the relationship between the trader and the municipality. Now, I led to believe that George municipality makes use of open access, and they basically supply a free meter reading service to the Munich, and then they make their money through the trade, the wheeling trade. That's how I'm led to believe they do their business. So it's a good concept because the municipality obviously gets a free service of reading their meters. But the question I have is the calculation of the wheeling trade. Does the trader do that calculation on behalf of the municipality, or is the municipality doing the calculation methodology themselves? Or do they prepare the calculation for the municipality for billing purposes? How does that work? Thank you.
All right, thanks. Thanks, Chris, for that one. So my understanding, so you want to say for the specific now, the bill, how do they do that calculations and allocation? So let me maybe start from the back. So what happens is generally a customer would have its bill that will have specific line items on the bill if they are a customer that is to be charged for specific NMD as well as the consumption in terms of the energy charge. So that will generally be the old normal traditional bill. So when you then have the wheeling, so what the wheeling has now done, it has then said to the customer that there's a specific kilowatt hours or energy that I'll be channeling through this grid to you as a customer. The customer and the trader, or the customer and the generator, have got an agreement around what energy will be supplied. On ESCOM or municipality side, we then have metering that can show us how much energy has been pushed through or delivered from this generation plant. We then get confirmation from the trader as to how they are allocating this energy. If they've got, for example, in Georgia, about 4 off-takers, then when they say, we've generated 200 kilowatts this day, at these specific times, if you're using a time of use systems during off-peak, peak, and as well as standard, this is what we've generated. It's 200, and would like to split this 200 by allocating 50 of those kilowatts to each of the off-takers. And then what we then need to do is to say, once we know the allocation, we then remove that allocated units and credit the customer, because that units are coming from the generator, and ours is to then measure to see the 200 must then also be seen as a reduction in what would have purchased from our bulk purchase point. So what the system in terms of automating does is that it looks at all these various inputs and then compares, but the trader allocates, because they need to tell us where is this energy that they've generated going. If it was a one-to-one, it's easier. But once you've got traders involved, they've got multiple off-takers maybe in the same network, then it's their responsibility to tell us from the energy, if it's a 2,000 megawatts across a week, they need to allocate that 2,000 and inform us. And then from the system, we then credit that accordingly, because we validated that we did receive 2,000 and this 2,000 is allocated in this manner. And then we then subtract our use of system, which is then that grid cost. So where the calculation from a municipal perspective is to say our use of system must be equal to what we would have generated had we procured the traditional way. That difference is what we want to ensure, and hence we are driving what we call revenue neutrality, to say we should not be losing in this transaction as a municipality. Whatever else they are gaining from buying cheaper energy, then that they can benefit through credits for that from a kilowatt perspective. I hope I've tried to clarify the response, Chris. I'm not sure if I've got your question fully answered. Thank you.
Thumbs up, Bongani. Thank you so much, Bongani, for your valuable input this morning. As always, I think you bring a certain approach to things which is very pragmatic, and we appreciate that. So, in the absence of any more questions, colleagues, I'm going to say goodbye to Bongani. If you've got questions for him, please use the chat. And I think this is the perfect segue into the next presentation, which we are a bit behind for, which is Courtney from City of Cape Town. We've spoken a lot about WEPs and monthly billing reconciliation. So let us reconfigure our mind a bit for this presentation, because we need to start looking at a more granular approach to billing reconciliation, which is half hourly. Courtney, are you around? There we go. Over to you.
Good morning, everyone. I would like this presentation to be a little bit more interactive. I've prepared a slate of slides, but these are really high-level slides, and I can take a deep dive anywhere if somebody requires me to do so. Just as a little bit of initial background is, we've done a wheeling pilot, and the wheeling pilot looked a bit different to the final wheeling implementation. And what I'm doing is I'm discussing the final wheeling implementation today. I hope you can see my screen clearly.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. This is just the outline of my talk. I'll have an overview. I'll talk about tariff separation. I will talk about participation. Then I'll talk a little bit about energy pools and then the metering and the data finally. I think by now in this training, you've seen the separation between the electricity as a utility and electricity or energy as a commodity. I think it's important to always keep this in the back of our mind. But when we talk wheeling, we must also remember that it's a financial transaction. The wires or the pipes in this, and the trains and the generation is always needed, and it's always part of the system. And connecting that to the system, as the previous speaker has clearly said, the rules is the utility rules where you are going to connect. So although there's a big separation between the utility and the commodity, the utility rules will remain, and you cannot buy the commodity if you haven't got the pipes or the wires. Okay, just going quickly through a few definitions. In this talk, I'm talking about prosumers, except if my tongue slips. Then I might talk about customers as well. And let's skip the rest. It's not too important. We will get to explaining it as we go on. The first question is how did we calculate the bill? Now, in essence, we've got a long history of billing customers, and our large users receive a bill in a certain format. And if you have a large user or any bill, it is quite simple to actually split the bill into the energy portion and the use of system portion. And what we did was we took the large user bill, and from that we subtracted the NECOM energy, the WEPs, or the commodity charges. And that gives us the system use of system bill. So the sum is, if you look at the large user bill and you compare that with the NECOM or the WEPs and use of system charges, you'll see there's a big alignment between the two. So now let's look at this in more detail. I'm not going to go through every single tariff on the books, but if we look at the user system charges that you see here, you'll see the service charge, the maximum demand charge, network access charges, which are fairly standard on all bills. And then what you'll see is the energy charges here has substantially dropped, because what if you look at your normal use of a large user bill, the high energy season peak energy will be R1.59 plus R5.48. So you'll see there's a substantial difference between the energy charges. We've actually moved the energy charges or the commodity charges onto a different bill. So this is the split, the use of system part and the commodity part. We've also split the commodity part in two, where if you didn't buy enough energy for yourself, then what you'll do is we will supply to you at this rate. And if you purchase too much, we will take it up. Or if you are disconnected via load shedding, or if there's a system fault, we will actually take up the excess and refund you for that, because whether we take it from you or whether we get it from NECOM doesn't really matter. It's the same energy. So when we implemented this, we made a decision that we know that energy hasn't got the same value every half an hour. And in the city of Cape Town, it is even more so, because the actual value of this energy in a certain half hour is influenced by our pump storage scheme. So although NECOM charges us a certain amount for every half an hour of energy, if we use it to pump water up the mountain for storage, then when we generate it, when it comes down the mountain again at a different time, some of it is lost in the efficiency of the generators and pumps. So what happens is we would dearly like to prevent cross-subsidization between one half an hour and another half an hour. We want the customers to be sure that they are not subsidized, because it's important to actually keep your subsidized customers separate from your non-regulated customers, and we found that as a basic principle that half an hour billing is far superior in our. There's also a few more things. It aligns the charges that we charge our customers exactly with the flows, and it also supports tariff modernization, because with the new market in place, we're going to move towards real-time pricing. And by moving to a half an hourly model now, what will happen is it will make the move towards real-time pricing much simpler. Will you stop me if there are any questions, or whether we need to go into a deep dive?
Yes, there aren't any questions yet, so you can
Cool.
just continue.
Cool.
Before you continue,
No, that's fine. That's fine.
I see
Corby, can
another
I
question.
ask? Sorry, it's Megan here, and as I'm not from a municipality, I'm probably asking a stupid question.
No.
But on the first thing where you showed the tariffs, I just wanted to ask, what is the energy charge in the use of system? So and what is that based on? So you've yeah. So I don't know if that's a question others had, but I was like, what's that?
Okay. Initially, it might look funny, because what we did here is we did the calculation that I told you about. So we took the energy out of the bill. So the use of system is the whole bill without energy. But what you must remember, what remains in there is all the subsidies, all the losses, the payments towards the rest of the municipality, and so forth. So you can the energy charges as part of the use of system charges. The main component of that is technical and non-technical losses, because we need to cover that to remain profitable, or to break even. Let me rather say it. The municipality does not try to make a profit; it tries to break even. So those energy charges, they are really technical and non-technical loss-related charges.
Seems, oh, you're good, Megan. Thumbs up.
Cool.
You can proceed, Courtney. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, we are on the slide. So when we look at the use of system charges, what we look at the energy flows coming from NECOM towards the prosumers, prosumer A and prosumer B. And what you'll see is the metering points are indicated. We charge the use of system on the consumption at A, we charge the use of system on the consumption of B, and G1 and G2, they really pay the use of system charges to NECOM. So we have got nothing to do with that. So this is how the picture looks without the energy. Now, if you add the energy to this, conceptually, the way we handled it is we put all the prosumers' energy flows into a pool. So what happens is prosumer A and B belongs to the pool. There's a contract with generator 1 and generator 2. And what happens, we tally up all the energy flows and we get a pool. And we see the municipality as either the supplier of last resort or the uptaker of last resort. So if there's a shortage in the pool, it means G1 and G2 did not supply the full load of A and B. We will charge A and B as a collective for the deficit. If G1 and G2 supplies and B is on load shedding, then what will happen? We will buy the surplus from the pool, and that will actually allow G1 and G2 and the pool to recover the energy cost. What we also do is, like I discussed before, the charges in the pool are settled every half an hour. So we do not settle this at the end of the month. We do the calculation every half an hour, and the bill is only issued once a month. But the settlement, the logical settlement, is done every half an hour. So this pool is balanced every half an hour. Any questions around that? Okay. So if you now look at the pool, it's fairly simple to set it up. We list all the installations that are part of the pool, and each of those installations will receive a separate user system wheeling account. So they will be charged for the utility and the services the utility supplies to them. Then what will happen is the pool will be under the control of what we call an aggregator. And the reason why we call it an aggregator and not a trader is in some cases, the customer will run his own pool. There might be one customer in a pool. In another case, a head office might say, I actually want all my subsidiaries to be in a pool. I will take care of the energy cost for all my subsidiaries, and the subsidiaries will settle with me through our internal billing system. So the aggregator will be an appointed party that is responsible for settling the surplus or the deficit energy, and that aggregator then settles the pool account on behalf of the members. That could also be a trader. Okay. Then, like I discussed, we would like external generation to supply these pools, and we would like to actually get our aggregators to build plant so that the pool doesn't need to be supplied by us. The pool account also establishes a legal framework for voluntary prosumer groupings, allowing the aggregator to negotiate long-term supply contracts. And the way we see that is that because there's a single pool account for a number of, say there's 20 aggregators and 20 prosumers, and they go into a pool, and there's a single pool account. That pool account gives the aggregator the opportunity to simply, it's a much simpler way of establishing the energy use of all the prosumers, because it's now on a single account, and it will be much simpler for the aggregator to go and obtain funding to supply the energy, because it's now in front of everybody on a single account. So we try to actually remove the complexity. What's important is the city does not do the allocation between the pool participants. We get involved in two ways. We charge the prosumers for the user system charges, and then we charge the pool or the aggregator for the surplus or the deficit. The way the surplus and the deficit and the interrelationship of the commodity or the energy between the participants, we have nothing to do with that. Our role is to calculate the surplus or deficit, calculate the user system charges for each prosumer, and to supply the load profiles of each prosumer to the aggregator. The aggregator can then either use that or different rules or whatever he wants to allocate the costs between the pool participants. And like I said, a consolidated pool account facilitates investment attraction, And it's also supported by the city's bankable surplus energy tariff. Because if you go into a long-term contract, you know that the city will take the energy at close to the WEPS rate. If one of your pool members defaults and leave the pool, or when there's load shedding or system faults. Okay, all our meters in the city is installed via SANS 474 standard requirements. We use meter workers that are accredited in accordance with SANS 74 to do the commissioning. All the meters that we install has SANA certificates, and our instrument transformers has traceable calibration certificates. All that is regulated via SANS 474. We only accept utility meters for the primary billing, and we propose that the meter data is shared between the back-end systems. In essence, we propose that when we share meter data, we use NRS 049-5-2. Only the metering data is part of that standard, no pricing or customer information. It's only the meter serial numbers. It's based on IEC 61968-9. We share only the totals or the bulk value on the registers. That makes it simpler to audit the readings. You can simply go to a meter in the middle of the month, wait for the half an hour to finish, take the readings from the meters, and then if the data arrives at your doorstep, you can open the file and see whether the totals align. SANS 474 requires us to align the totals on the meters with the profiles every year. We propose that if you only capture interval data, that you align it every day, because you can read the meter total every day and then do the alignment that way. When you do those calculations, there's a quality field which for each reading, and you can say, I've calculated in your quality field, I've calculated the reading from the bulk value, or I've calculated the bulk value from the profile or the interval data, and the last value you can say you've balanced it with the total for the next day. Okay, so it's quite a modern standard. It uses JSON, electronic signing, and TLS. Okay. Like I said, I can easily deep dive into quite a lot of other aspects, but what we try to do is we try to support modern tariffs, get more sustainable energy in the ground, and facilitate investment into those projects. I've discussed now how we differentiate or separate our normal tariffs between the utility or WEPS rate and the commodity WEPS rate and the utility or network and use of system rate. We've discussed the two roles where the prosumers are captured customers on the network, and they each get their own bill for the network part, and how we actually aggregate the commodity charges to an aggregator, which sometimes fulfills the role of a trader. I've talked about how we aggregate half an hourly and how we the half an hourly interval settlement, and that we then provide the bill at the end of the month. I've also discussed quickly how we've interchanged the meter data and how we rely on SANS 474 to make sure that we've got good quality metering. Okay, any questions?
Thank you so much, Courtney, for that insightful presentation. My assessment of the presentation really is that it's very much aligned also to our training, but the significant difference is in the granularity, or is in the detail, you know, where City of Cape Town really does half hourly billing. So of course, for various,
the settlement half an hourly, it's different.
yeah, yes, for significant purposes, which is of course you mentioned, you want to minimize cross subsidies between the time slots, but also you want to promote tariff modernization and of course prepare for the upcoming wholesale electricity markets in next year, April. So
Correct.
this is, yes. So of course I'm thinking all municipalities will at some point aspire to participate the way in which Cape Town wants to participate in the market. So although their billing reconciliation starts off monthly, this is sort of the destination where we all want to get to. So excellent presentation. Let me ask you the first question, which is on the chat. There's a question there that asks, is excess feed in surplus? So you mentioned excess feed in on your slides.
Yeah, that is if the generators generate too much for the pool. So there's too much generation in the pool, and that surplus is then the city is the user of last resort. We will take that energy and buy it from you rather than buy it from NECOM.
Excellent. I hope you sorted, Manfred. George, over to you.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. Connie, thank you for the presentation. Just a question also relating to the surplus. How do you manage the MFMA and the supply chain regulations regarding that surplus that you're then taking? You know, how do you do the supply chain? How do you work that? I think I might have an idea to what the answer is, but yeah, let me give you a chance to answer, and then maybe I might have a follow-up.
What I'm going to do, I'm going to show another slide just to clarify where the surplus comes from and where it arises. Okay, if you just bear with me a moment, I just need to swap screens. Can you see my screen again?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So what happens is we aggregate half an hourly. This is prosumer A, prosumer B, prosumer C, and the generator from NECOM. And we issue user system bills for this profile. And then what we do on the summated profile, we add 1, 2, 3, 4 blockies on top, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 at the bottom. So the sum is actually 1 blockie on the bottom. And we do this every half an hour, and then we apply the time of use stuff. And then that appears on the bill. wheeling consumption deficit, high, peak demand. So that is for a whole month. And the wheeling feed-in for this customer is very little, 29 cents. And wheeling system feed-in off-peak was 49 cents. So this is the shortage or the deficit, which we charge the customer for. And we hope that he will actually purchase more generation in the future. So this is what we do currently. And we, because our tariff has been approved by NERSA, we do not see an issue. Because the whole supply chain stuff that you talk about, whether you hide it anyway or another, it actually comes down to what's on the page over here. So what you can do, you can now take that in there and you can subtract it over there so that you've only got the net value. But in any case, if you go step back, the way you calculate it is actually the way I explained. So at the end of the transaction or the end of the putting it on a bill and sending it to a customer, while the customer is actually using more like this one, whether it's as a negative value on the bill or not doesn't really matter. It only becomes an issue if you have to pay the customer. And we have not reached it. And we would hope to reach that soon. And I'm sure that because the tariff is on the books and approved by council, the supply chain issues are not problematic in that regard. We do not foresee any issues at this stage.
Excellent, excellent. I'm hoping you are sorted, George. We are running.
I can also show you just quickly. This is a normal use of system bill. Sorry, this is internal documentation. Ignore if you see a customer's name, but I think that's...
Sorry, the slides are not moving on my side.
Yeah,
not too sure.
Even on my side.
Okay, let me try again. Better?
Yes.
Did you see the previous bill that I showed?
No, we did not.
No, we did not.
Okay, apologies.
We'll have to try and wrap it up soon.
There,
yes.
Okay, this is the bill for the pool. This is the aggregator bill, and you'll see that it's got the totals on here, and there's some reverse energy over here. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. Then the other bill that I showed is the use of system bill. Please ignore the customer name if you can see it. And this is, it looks like a normal bill, but these charges are much less, and this is last year's charges. So you can see that these are much less than the normal energy charges, while the demand charge, service charge, and network access charge are. So each prosumer gets a bill like this, and you'll see that there are no reverse energy on this bill. So what will happen is his contribution towards the pool is actually to the benefit of the pool. And it will be part of the load profile that we actually send to the aggregator. And the aggregator will then sort out how this customer is paid for the parts that he contributed to the pool.
Excellent.
Any other questions?
I think, Courtney, I've asked the colleagues to paste any more questions on the chat in the interest of time, because we have to get to our next presentation. But Yeah, I'd like to just say thank you so much for
Okay,
providing this insight.
what
Sorry?
I just want to say something. What I've done is there are two presentations that I've actually given to the pack. The one presentation is the overview that I did, and this presentation is a deep dive into the business requirements document. So if you look at it, it's the way the business requirements document is complied, plus the use cases, and then the samples, and the way the system is put together, and some load curves. So this will actually assist you. But if there are customer information there, please treat it as restricted. It might not be the true customer information, but it's also so old by now that I don't think it's worth it to anybody. So thanks a lot. I will send both presentations.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Courtney. That was really an insightful presentation. Colleagues, I think we need a leg stretch. We really need a leg stretch just to gather ourselves a bit, but we don't have much time. So I'm going to allow us at least to return, let us see. 10, 10:35, colleagues. Let's try because we've got so many other presentations, but today is a short day. So we'll really break early, take longer breaks. Let's return at 10:35, please, for Aisha's virtual wheeling presentation. Thank you so much. Thank you to this morning's speakers, and thank you to my 100+ colleagues for joining the call. See you in 3 minutes. There we go. Huh. I'm hoping colleagues have returned from their short break. So just quickly, with this agenda slide. Oh, disaster. Anyway, so colleagues, welcome back to the third presentation of the day. I'm hoping Aisha's on the call. If I can just confirm that.
I am.
Okay. There we go. Welcome. So colleagues, I think my mind is still on lunch. But the next presentation, you remember Aisha's initial presentation where she shared the different wheeling options at NECOM. You've got traditional wheeling, you've got, portfolio wheeling, and then you had, virtual wheeling. So this next session is going to focus primarily on that. There's lots of interest on this subject, so I'm super excited for this chat. I'll just let you take over then, Aisha.
Thank you, Nahu. Morning, everyone. So today I think my chat is about virtual wheeling. It is our latest product offering in terms of the wheeling products. It came online last week of March this year, and so effectively was available to the market from the 1st of April 2025. I'm just going to put my presentation in presentation mode. Okay, so let's talk about virtual wheeling. So virtual wheeling came about as a request from our LV customers to also participate in the wheeling environment. We didn't have a framework, NERSA didn't have a framework. There was no guidance towards for LV customers to do any type of wheeling. Right? It was going to be seen as too cumbersome. The amount of energy being transported is way too low to justify the cost involved, etc. So we had to come up with a methodology, and Shirley was a big part of this, although she's no longer with NECOM. We initiated the project, but we already had business rules in place in terms of what we wanted to apply. So from the DX wheeling options, the distribution ones, the one that was then launched, as I mentioned, is virtual wheeling. So we've got two product services available under wheeling at the moment, traditional and virtual, the one-to-one and virtual. Portfolio is currently in pilot phase and will be available from the 1st of April 2026. So we are piloting portfolio with 4 of our selected customers and the buckets. So that's now in build phase. In the virtual wheeling phase, we now offer that on all networks, all across all licensing areas, applying certain business rules. And I'm going to go through those business rules with you as we go through the product description. What needs to be said is that it is refunded retrospectively. In other words, the credits are refunded retrospectively. It is done a month and a half after the actual transaction has taken place, and it is at the WEB's losses rate. There is a management or administration fee that's payable monthly on this account, which is in addition to the current charges that would be on a bill. Okay. So what does virtual wheeling mean? It just basically means the buyer of the energy, right? Whoever that is, in this case, at this moment, it's not a trader. It can be a large entity. It can be, a group of companies that come together that decide to buy energy as a collective and then claim for that energy from their various off-taking points, but it's the buyer of the energy. It's a separate contract from the off-taker's existing energy supply agreement. So we don't do an amendment to an existing contract. We draw up a separate transactional contract, right? Because it's a third party type of contract. So that party buys energy from the generator. The generator will nominate that party as the off-taker. Now, in this case, on the Ducosa, there will not be a premise or off-taker reference. There will be an account reference, right? And that account is then linked to multiple other accounts, either sitting on the municipal side or the NECOM side of the network. At the end of the month, what then transpires is after the generator has pushed his energy into the grid, we will bill the customers from the NECOM side, right, whether it's a bulk point as a municipality or bill the direct NECOM customers for that consumption that they, or the demand they've taken from the grid. Customer pays that account or doesn't pay, whatever the case is, right? And that will then determine whether you, the buyer, can actually claim for the energy the customer then consumed against that purchased energy. So the rules, the business rules, which I'm going to go through, will define whether they can or cannot. So that then is about a 45-day period after the actual transaction has been completed, right? You will also see that the intaker the off-taker in this case doesn't have a direct contract with NECOM for wheeling. There is no amendment on the SA, no amendment to the account, because they are still expected to pay their account, same as the municipal customer will still be expected to transact and pay their account and their obligation to the municipality. This comes after all of that has taken place, and the buyer now says, but I bought energy, right, from this generator which you utilized. Please pay us for it. Give us our refund for it. And that is what this transaction is deemed as. It's deemed as a refund. So with this whole transaction, NECOM, with this launch of the product, we went in and we did quite a intensive setup for this, and I'll go through that in a bit more detail. But if you link up on our website, and you're more than welcome to actually link up on that, hopefully, I'm not sure. Can you see my website, or do I have to go unshare and share again?
Yeah,
now
unshare and share again.
Okay. So just briefly to go through the virtual wheeling website. As I mentioned last week this time, we launched a website, right, for specifically with the launch of virtual wheeling. So we're updating this. There is going to be a marketing material that's coming. NECOM's running a business-to-business campaign going forward, aimed at wheeling and all the various wheeling products, right? So for virtual wheeling, you will see just the brief explanation of what I've just gone, I've taken you through. But what we've also done is, before you apply, consider the following. So consider the business rules, consider the sizing, consider the implication for what it means. And this is what our one-stop wheeling office is expected to do. So take the customers through various options to look at their scenarios that they want to apply, to look at potentially, you know, when you talk aggregation, whether that works or doesn't work in certain circumstances. And then once you've done all of that and you still want to proceed with the product, right, with the option of going on to this service, we then explain the claims process and how that works and how the refund works, and the fact that it's not a direct month-to-month one in terms of when it's generated, you can claim for it and you get credit for it. No, there is a month-and-a-half wait period between the actual generation and the financial transaction taking place, the refund taking place. We take you through what is required from an NECOM side for you to claim, etc. And then the last one is obviously the actual application, right? So we take you through the application. Once you've submitted an application, your application will be assigned to a customer exec. That customer exec will assess, talk to you, tell, you know, there is a fee involved. Before we process or create an account, we will inform the customer that there is a application administration fee, which I use customer execs, I use engineers in terms of the assessment of this. I am going to recover their cost. And that's the fee that you are paying. It's the fee to use that specialist time. And I can tell you a lot of these contracts, they take hours. They don't take days. I mean, sorry, they don't take minutes. They literally take hours in terms of assessment. Just looking up, previous contracts, looking up the DOAs given by clients for them or their participation agreement in these things. So it does take a lot of time, and I have to recoup those costs. On the website as well, you will see we've got a terminology guide which assists customers in terms of the terms we use. NECOM is very we've got loads of abbreviations and loads of terms in various environments across the NECOM business. So for wheeling in itself, we wanted customers, as you will see in our contracts, it's very much geared towards certain terminology, and we wanted you to understand that terminology as an end user. So there's a guide for that. There's a guide for frequently asked questions. We had various interactions at various forums, seminars, kind of platforms when we introduced the concept of virtual wheeling, loads of questions came up. We actually compiled those questions into frequently asked questions and then attempted to answer them through that documentation. We will talk to the metering requirements from any customer that is linked to a wheeling product needs to be on a time of use tariff with a certain metering config, right? So that talks to that. What metering standards have to be aligned, the alignment of the metering standards, the meter readings, etc. So NRS, so for the various NRS standards as well as the SANS standards that are required, the business rules, right, that we require, and which I'll take you through in terms of the presentation, the claim form. So there is a separate claim form. All of these are, at this moment, we're just waiting for licenses, but we will then launch the interim platform in the next month. So you can apply online, you can claim online, right? You will only get access to the claims platform or the claims pages if you have a registered contract, right? You will be able to request your various readings online for this particular claim at half-hourly intervals if you have a contract in place, etc. Then there's the application form, the actual submission required for virtual wheeling for metering. So this, for example, says to you that I need to know where the meter is, the GPS coordinates of the meter, the manufacturer of the meter, the serial number of the meter, etc. when it is not an NECOM meter. Right, if you're talking about programmable meters, I need to know CTVT information, all of that on per meter basis, right? So it depends on the size of the off-taker, and then you will submit your metering, registration details with NECOM as part of the contractual process, not the claims process, the contractual process. We will plot these meters geospatially, right, on our databases to confirm where they're located, if they are falling within a certain municipality, because that is important, as that will define whether you can actually claim for that point of supply or not. NECOM requires forecasting these days for both off-takers and generators. So your virtual account, where you have 1,000 points linked to it, off-takers linked to it, right? You've got to aggregate those and say, okay, that is the forecast for the next 3 years per time of use period, per month, that this particular grouping of customers will take at maximum from the grid. Here's the generating aggregation, because this is not per generator, this is aggregated. So if your bucket of generators, there can be up to 50 generators, right? allocates 5%, 2%, 10%. Whatever the allocation is, that allocation falls into that bucket. That bucket needs to have a forecast for the next 3 years, sorry. And Eskom does then require that owner of that contract to update that forecast every twice a year in specified months, right? And then, yeah, that's it from the website perspective. I'm going to stop sharing. You can go through the website at your own leisure. It is linked on the presentation. I will go back to the presentation. In the meantime, you are okay. So just on the actual presentation. So the wheeling rules are simple. We will not directly contract with individual off-takers for virtual wheeling. What I mean by this is with an end user, I will not contract with them as an individual entity if it's a 50 kVA supply or 16 kVA supply or even a 1 MVA supply. I do not do virtual wheeling one-to-one. I do virtual wheeling on a one-to-many kind of basis, which is what I mentioned. There needs to be a buyer and multiple off-takers, right? And that also then includes municipalities, that is where there's no relationship between Eskom and the municipality for virtual wheeling. The municipal revenue, therefore, will not be affected. So we don't have a say in terms of whether a customer can or cannot, contract with us if they buy energy from a generator on the Eskom grid and they would like to be refunded. It doesn't go through the municipal contract, right? It is separate from that. It is a claim, as I mentioned, a refund claim. The refund to the buyer will be based on the wholesale rate, as losses. At WIPs, less losses because losses are payable. A refund will be calculated based on time of use periods. Now, I know my colleague from City of Cape Town was talking about half hourly, offsetting. We still offset at monthly basis, right? So calculated in the time of use periods on a monthly summation basis. Eskom, when they will move to hourly summation, that will be communicated in due course with customers with sufficient notification. We are still fully on the monthly summation basis on time of use. The refund that we give you will be equal to the total energy consumed, and remember, this is a retrospective claim. This would be the last type of contract that someone would draw up for the excess energy that they haven't assigned to a traditional or portfolio account, right? This is at the end of the line kind of wheeling transaction. Because the payment is a month and a half later and it's not directly on the month-to-month basis. So depending on that type of offset, we'll say that, additional energy can be pushed onto the grid, but also note that our contract is specific. Whatever you've contracted for, if you haven't used it, for this month, you lose it. So if you contracted to move 10 megawatt hours of energy and the collective sum of your claim is 9.8 megawatt hours, that effectively means that the balance will be lost. You cannot bank the balance of energy in any way or form, right? As banking is not part of virtual wheeling. You can, however, claim more than once in a particular month. What this means is that you can submit a claim for a portion of your customer base and then keep on adding to that customer base in terms of you can submit another claim for some of the other customers until you've completely used up the full bucket of energy, as long as the customers that you are claiming for have qualified. So when Eskom off-taker, right, the third point here, when Eskom off-taker or a municipality is in debt to Eskom, there will be no wheeled energy credit refund processed. So qualifying accounts and qualifying rules means if you're in debt, we do not honor this agreement. Okay. As phase 1, let me just put that as phase 1. NECOM has, however, brought up option for gen payments for the generator to pay the wheeled portion or the obligation of the wheeled portion charges, right, to facilitate this transaction. But that's something when we take the customer through, we tell them what options are available. There's no avoidance of the of any tariff charges on the off-taker's account, right? So meaning that what we do offset is the actual energy charge and not any service admin or network charges. The buyer will be responsible for providing NECOM with the required municipal connected customer data, such as the meter reads half hourly when requested. On the initial claim form, it is summated energy request, and for the next, I think it is going to be for the next 6 to 9 months on the first processing 6 to 9 months, we will request half hourly data since we want to build a database of that particular point of supply so that from an audit perspective, it becomes easier down the line for us to audit and profile that customer and not having to jump through so many audit hoops. There will be no requirement for a deposit amendment or additional deposit on a virtual contract. So when I contract on virtual wheeling, it is completely deposit free, right? It is not an agreement that requires a deposit. And we will raise administration charges on virtual wheeling. That's either at on the wheeling account per contract or per point of supply. What that just basically means is there's a break-even point. 1,732 points is equivalent to the break-even point. If you go beyond 1,732 points, that means I charge you per point of supply at a specific rate, right? That rate will be shared when we talk to the individual entities about, the contract, etc. And then we charge the application fee as mentioned. I know I'm going fast, but there is pretty much a lot of data that I need to just work through. I mean, when we shared last week the high-level process for how we process applications, this is just an extended version of that. So this is the virtual wheeling version of the end-to-end contracting process, right? You will see that there is an email address to which all applications go to, and all claims will be processed through is clientservices@eskom.co.za. We've got AI and bots in the background that will be reading the claims, that will be taking it through the various modeling processes that we've got. This is just our standard routine, hence the application processing fee. The fact that I have applications that's linked to 4,000 off-takers, right? I've got to do my checks and balances, got to get the DOAs, the NDAs, all of those things in line. Takes time, takes effort, and, cost. There is a standard contract for virtual wheeling, which we have just completed. I've just been requested to amend it in terms of the terminology for buyers or definition for buyers and sellers, and I'm busy reviewing that at the moment. But the contracts are developed and they are standard. They're pro formas that is shared, in the virtual wheeling space. The only thing that differs is who your generator is in the annexures, who your off-takers are, and who the actual contract is with. So pretty easy contract to read. There's confidentiality clauses, there's data sharing clauses, etc., which is not standard on your ESA per se. So once all the legal lease has been completed, we will now create that account on our billing system. So before I've talked about updating the account and amending the record. Now, this case, it's a new account. It is to create that bucket of generation, right? So it's a transactional account. There's no premise linked to it, etc. On the customer side, once that customer has been created, we now actually get our data scientists involved. That contract, sorry, one step back. The contract is transcribed. It is converted into a script. Right, that script is linked to all the ESCOM meters that would be attached to that annexures, that off-takers. So if there's an off-taker in a municipal area, it is the municipal's account, bulk accounts, that are linked on that script, and that will then deem if that municipality qualifies under the good payer principle, or under the default, no default, no, accounting good standing principle, then all the accounts in that municipality will qualify for claims for that particular month. This script is done once off unless the customer then amends their contract on a month-to-month basis, and they can. This is not a fixed contract for a year, right? This is a contract for 5 years. Can be stopped by the customer at any time with sufficient notification, but the term is 5 years for virtual wheeling. Does not mean you can't renew the contract after, however many times, but the contract initial term is 5 years. So from a ESCOM perspective, once that scripting has been done, we generate what we call a monthly qualifying list, right? That will pull in data from our metering, our billing system, etc. That qualifying list will be issued to the account holder on a monthly basis to say, these are the accounts for this month that you may claim from an ESCOM perspective. So it will highlight all the direct ESCOM points as well as the municipalities then that qualify for that month. The claim then can be initiated by the account holder on the monthly basis, the next day, the same day, a month, a week later. So you've got 2 months within which to claim for a particular month. So the overlap is a 2-month period if you want to take more time to claim for it. But the minute we issue with a qualifying list, it means you can then claim. There is a quasi-manual process we have in the meantime while we're waiting for the platform to be finalized. And as I mentioned, the contract will run for the duration unless it is stopped by the customer. Okay. So what we've also done in our process now, I have an entire retail department across 9 provinces which needs to know about the product and not necessarily enable it. We've created works instructions for every wheeling product. And this is some of the things that fall under that works instruction for virtual wheeling. Where we go step by step to say only cumulative energy will be claimed for, no other charges and fees. Metering for accounts connected on municipal side of the grid must meet the ESCOM metering specification. All premises and installed metering we must be able to access those and audit them. So what we've said to contract holders is if the municipality doesn't have time of use tariffs, right, or the municipality doesn't have a time of use meter at that particular point, you've got to go install stats metering aligned to the ESCOM approved meters, right? And that you can use. But when we audit, we would require certain data from the customer directly as pertaining to their municipal billing for consumption to align on what is metered on the stats meter versus what the municipality says they consume on a monthly basis. Okay. So municipal linked accounts are only claimable if the municipality is in good standing with ESCOM. ESCOM linked accounts are only claimable, if there's no outstanding, we're going through. ESCOM will settle claims based on when the list of registered premises claimable, for is amended. So a customer may register 1,000 points of supply. But off-takers at least, they can only, if they want to, they can claim for 1, for 10, or for all 1,000 points of supply, right? It is not okay, I've got 20 accounts registered here, off-takers, I must actually claim for 20 off-takers. No, it is the best fit for the bucket of energy. NECOM will provide a list of qualifying accounts. I went through that at high level. Should the claimant value be greater than what NECOM says you can claim for, I'm sending that claim directly back to you and say, adjust your claim, please. It already falls outside of the parameters. NECOM will not do this for you. You will do it. So this is not a case of whether I will decide which of the accounts qualify or not. No, you as the claimant will decide which accounts qualify and for which accounts you will claim. So this is going to be a back and forth from NECOM's perspective. We don't expect it to be that complicated, as most of the companies are. I think they are building APIs or using APIs to actually facilitate this transaction. But once the claim has been verified, the refund will be an adjustment type on our billing system. So this account will be credited with a certain amount. That refund is paid first option, cash back into the bank of the claimant, right? So we will pay that on electronic fund transfer through to the claimant's account. The claimant then, the buyer of the energy, will distribute that to their end users. It's nothing to do with NECOM. I don't facilitate that. Or if that claimant is a multinational company that has thousands of accounts with NECOM and they deem that they want us to use that credit to pay, to offset the load accounts that we have linked, we will do that. But that's now expected to be in phase 2 and not phase 1. It's a very labor-intensive process if we use it under the current system. In the future, we will be doing it automatically if that is an option the customer wants to go into. But first option is we'll give you cash in the bank and you distribute it. It's not for NECOM to determine where it goes to. Okay. This is the quasi-manual process. This took us literally a couple of months to work out in terms of the hows, the whys, and how it works. Basically, high level, NECOM initiates this process after application, right? We will send a qualifying list to the customer or the claimant, right, the buyer of the account, who will then evaluate that list, add the municipal off-taking points, and then supply us with the data back, right? So we will have the municipal energy claims, so the reads from the municipal points. We will have the NECOM data from the generator already as part of this contract, and then the load customers from the NECOM side already linked. We will verify that through our various systems that we have built for this, and determine whether the customer, whether the energy claim is valid or not. If it is a valid claim, we will process the refund through our billing system, no problem. If there is an issue, we will notify the claimant, sorry, listen, look at your data. This point of supply doesn't qualify, but you added him. Please take him off, correct, whatever. I'm not, as I mentioned before, going to adjust any of the claims as it best suits me, because the end user, the contract owner the claim needs to match up with what I'm going to process, right? So the rules are simple, right? NECOM will pay the claimed amount if it is verified. Where the claimed amount is greater than what I say they can claim for, I'm pushing it back to the end user. Or at the end of the day, I'm saying, here's the point. If you're claiming for a greater amount, note that from an NECOM side, I'm only first then going to pay the NECOM accounts what they qualify for, and whatever municipal accounts then can match. You can understand why I'm saying it needs to go back to the claimant. Okay, and it's where it's less. If you've not claimed for the energy, I'm not going to worry, because if you don't claim for it, you lose it, right? That is the principle of phase 1 of virtual wheeling. This was the pilot. This was the outcome. We literally ran a pilot from April 2023 to about November 2024. A lot of the pilot was the pre-pilot conditioning, right? What will be the rules? What will be the scope? What will be the contract terms, etc. It was a lot of back and forth, loads of legal, teams involved, etc. And then we got down to the nitty-gritty, the basics, the implementation. That took us literally a month or two on each phase. It wasn't too complicated. It was data that was being verified, connection points that was being verified. We had a slight hiccup on the municipal side when we introduced, because phase 1 of that pilot was just use ESCOM data, just use ESCOM points, not a problem. We got to a point where we were quite happy with the variances. There was less than 0.05% variance on the calculations and the information submitted. So we were happy. We also found a lot of issues on the actual accounts, which the customer was then requested to go clear up, because there was a 20% variance in terms of the amount of accounts they want to claim for versus what we said qualified. And that was a nice learning experience for both us and the customer. And then phase 2, then with the municipal accounts, as I mentioned, the only outstanding one which ran this phase 2 longer than it was supposed to was the verification of the metering data and the meters from the ESCOM side. So we sent a team to the field. It was an issue on whether we had access or not, and whether, we could actually download the data. So that took a while, hence the standard metering requirements that came out after that. And then phase 3 was the monthly runs, and that monthly runs actually went very well. We stopped those monthly runs, I think, at the end of October last year, and declared the pilot a success and ready for implementation. We were ready to go live in January. However, due to certain internal issues within ESCOM, we actually went live the last week of March. This is what we will be implementing as the final solution. It is the wheeling platform, or the virtual wheeling platform, as it was initially known as. This is the platform that will manage transactions going forward, and this is what we are currently building, right? Where you can plug into this platform with your API or via an Excel spreadsheet, upload certain things. You'd be able to extract data from an ESCOM side. You'd be able to put through a claim from an ESCOM side. If you're on portfolio wheeling, you'd be able to adjust your allocations on a monthly basis for that bucket of energy. You'd be able to request for amendments on your contracts, etc. So this is part of the distribution energy trader solution, and therefore this will be a tool that helps you self-manage your contract in this space. You'd be able to view your transactions, your profile, your your contract and the performance thereof in various versions of that view. We will allow you to load certain Power BI views, or even BI views, depending on the systems we're going to use. From our side, every user will get, as part of the administration cost, will be charged a fee to access this, but it's covered under the administration charge. You'd be able to get 3 licenses for this. If you want more, that's at a cost per license basis. And as mentioned last week, to manage all of this, we have introduced the ESCOM Wheeling Office, which is the one-stop wheeling shop. Now, as also mentioned, our job is not just to manage wheeling. Our job is to actually offer customers an advisory service to see which options are the best from an ESCOM perspective. Wheeling is not our only service. We have various, energy demand programs. We have other offers like standard offer, etc. So we will actually look at what's best for the customer and what would suit their needs at a particular time. We will facilitate, various interactions with other departments within NECOM, just so that the customer doesn't feel as if they're hopping from one shop to another shop. So it is a one-stop service that we are intending to offer through the Wheeling One-Stop Shop. Okay, then from the systems side and the training side, we've got a specialized group, so we're not going to roll out massive intensive training. What we have, however, developed is training material with assistance of the NECOM consultants. I'm going to give you a view of that training material. And we've also converted that training material into an online training course through our School of Customer Services in NECOM. So it is going to be an online course which anyone within NECOM can then register for, do the training course and the assessment, and then they would have that as one of their qualifying, modules, as well as the system how-to guide. The system is completed, the amendments on the billing system that we needed to do for automated allocations. Yesterday or before, Keith mentioned that it's a somewhat manual process. We are changing that up over the next 2 months. We're testing out the system now for the automatic allocation of wheeled energy. That used to be manually allocated because it needs to be, automated. It cannot be user dependent. Can you see my screen that says Virtual Wheeling Handbook?
Yes.
Okay, so Virtual Wheeling Handbook, this is the training book, right? So just give you an idea of what the training just looks like. Just takes the user through wheeling, what the benefits thereof is, the options for it, and the various, how we define the various wheeling options. Virtual wheeling, right? The principles, the contracting, and then this type of information. These are the records that ESCOM has that is linked to virtual wheeling. We've got a virtual wheeling policy. We've got a management of wheeling contracts and distribution, works instruction, which is the one I was talking to, that covers all the wheeling products, and the whole roles, racy, step-by-step guide of how you do it, right? The non-disclosure agreement, we require every customer on virtual wheeling to sign, not customer, but contractee, because they are working with data that's not their own, and they're not allowed to share that data outside of this contract. The ESAs that have to be signed, which is the virtual wheeling contract, the client website, the terminology guide, etc. So this all happened prior to us launching the actual virtual wheeling process. This is what the application form looks like, right? So you'll see it online, basically giving step-by-step guides to my users on what needs to be done when a submission is done for application. So my customer exec can guide the customer through this process. Still part of the verification, you'll see the application form is pretty, intensive, not or detailed, but not too detailed. And this would be the forecasting type of information that we require. Supporting documents. This is things I expect my teams to go through. This is the contract that we have, right? Copy of the works instruction, but this is what I expect my execs to do in terms of when they initiate the contract, finalizing the contract, and then the creation of the account on the billing system, setup, linking the off-takers, creating the scripts, processing the claims, which we went through. This is what a qualifying list looks like, right? Basically, the objective there is to send this list to the end user, the claimant, to say to them, okay, this is the energy that the customers that are linked on your contract, these are the total accounts which qualify. These are the time of use periods, the cumulative energy over the various time of use periods that they qualify for. versus now this is a month claim and this is a billed month claim. Difference is on the virtual wheeling contracts, we do not align to a calendar month. So some of these accounts will be prorated in terms of usage. Some of them will be, for the full month. So there is a bill month calculation versus a calendar month calculation. It's opted. The option depends on the end user and what they're going to opt for. Most cases, a calendar month will be utilized due to PPAs, right? So, but I give you both views in your qualifying list, and these are the accounts which you submitted but does not qualify, right, for the actual claim back. This is what we deem as your potential loss in terms of claim that you cannot claim for. And so you'll see it's very detailed. We'll provide this on a month-to-month basis. And that's why that initial scripting is so important for us, right? It takes 30 days for any end user or contract owner to change up a contract. Because I have to go change not only the physical contract, but also the script and whatever then comes from that script to initiate a claim. Once we've received, this is what the claim form looks like. Once we've received that claim, this is going to be automated. It's on a platform already. This is what we expect to do, the business rules we apply, etc. But this basically is the high level. Then this is validation checks. Match virtual account holder name to ESCOM records. Ensure ESCOM account number corresponds to virtual account. Confirm accuracy of VAT. So all of that is just, basic checks and balances. Ensure off-taker names are listed on the qualifying list. So you're claiming for a point, but is it actually registered on the annexures as part of your contract? Is the meter where you said it was going to be? So if you're claiming for it under City of Cape Town, but it actually sits with George Municipality, it's not qualifying, for example, it doesn't qualify under that particular claim. Go correct your details, etc. These are checks and balances. The last check we will do is a physical on-site check if we feel the data is not, there's too many mismatches on the data. Then we will request a on-site, random sample check. And that will delay the actual claim. So the idea of the meter audits, what we do, right? As it was mentioned, meters must comply with SANS 474, etc. So ESCOM has all of that. All set up in the metering rules. This is just the verifying process. And as you're seeing, it's a lot of information we do for verification, lots of steps involved. A lot of that has been automated, right? One or two things is still manual. For example, the approval of the claim, once it gets through all the verification, there's a delegation in ESCOM for that refund to be approved, and it will follow that, right? This is just how the claim, the energy refund works. And that was the training documents, right? So that is what we developed then from a team's perspective. So the current status is virtual wheeling is up and running. We're expecting to process our first claim in October. The generator went live at the end of August, right? The contract is for 1,000 plus points off takers with one company. We are processing 5 other applications at the moment, also, but bigger offtake points. Scope 2 or phase 2 scope has been finalized, where we want to expand the offerings under virtual wheeling. And so we're expecting that to be finished before December, and then offer that to the market with the virtual wheeling platform that we're currently building to, the universal platform ESCOM will roll out by the 1st of April to roll it out in the new financial year. And that, in a nutshell, is virtual wheeling. It's a lot, but that's virtual wheeling that we have.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Aisha. I'm sure there's lots of questions. I'll just take one in the interest of time. Colleagues, remember the chat is where we use the chat for more questions in the interest of time. Is there any question? But as I wait for a question, my assessment here really is that virtual wheeling is is a solution for those low voltage customers. Let me make an example. If you have Vodacom, for example, they've got towers all over South Africa, then they want to consolidate, those towers into, I guess, a single off-taker, if I can say it simply like that, and then wheel energy to those various towers, or maybe, I don't know, if you've got a property portfolio, or you are a franchisor, but of course you are located below the mini-sub at the low voltage point. I hope my assessment is correct there, Aisha. But
Okay, so
one
virtual
question,
wheeling,
colleagues.
sorry, virtual wheeling is offered not only to low voltage, right? It's all voltage customers. Low voltage is the initial, was the initial push for developing the product. But it's open to medium and high voltage customers as well. So you've got a group of you've got one customer that has multiple points of supply across the various voltages and across various municipalities, etc., multinational, right? He has office blocks, he has production plants, he has distribution centers, all of those things. They will lie at various points on the network across various municipal networks and ESCOM networks. That is the intent of virtual wheeling, is to bring that customer doesn't have to sign multiple contracts, right? Can sign one contract.
Excellent. I see we don't have any questions for now, Aisha. I just want to say thank you so much for that input. Of course, it's a lot, but I think what you've covered in the short period of time provides a bit of clarity for us. And hopefully, you mentioned you'll also be having possibly more training sessions in maybe other forums.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. We are extremely behind time, colleagues. We need to get into our next session, which is Johan from Green Cape. Just wants to give us an industry perspective of wheeling and how, of course, private sector and public sector can work together to enable this particular solution. Is Johan on the line? I'm hoping you're still around.
Yeah, I'm here. Hi, Sanawa. Thank you very much for the opportunity. And I'm going to dive right into it.
Let's do it.
And share my screen. I'm going to give you a little bit of an industry perspective of wheeling and dive right into it in terms of why wheeling is important. So it's in terms of energy security, for a long-term price security perspective. So not necessarily only from a load shedding perspective, but from a long-term price security perspective. Because customers can sign a 20-year deal and know what a majority of the electricity would cost for the next 20 years if they sign this deal. And it gives them that opportunity to do long-term planning. So from an energy security perspective, that's quite important. In terms of decarbonization, so access to renewable energy with the international pressure to decarbonize industries is very important for industry to have access to renewable energy. We're seeing quite a lot of pressure and even companies that are on the verge of almost closing down because they can't get access to renewable energy and the quantity that they need. Space constraints is a very big challenge. So energy intensive customers don't have enough physical space to fit more renewable energy on their roofs. Wind doesn't necessarily is a possibility on site. So it's mostly just solar PV. And that sort of leads into one of the other drivers was the energy mix. So customers need more than just solar, more than just daytime power. They need a mix of wind and other generation sources to meet more of their load. And then there's obviously technical constraints from a grid perspective of hosting capacity and the local grid for that penetration. And that is all things that wheeling can contribute to solve. There are some national perspective things, but I think I'm going to skip through them just in terms of time, and the presentation will be shared. So maybe just a few key concepts I want to get to is like the more wheeling you as a municipality allow, the more valuable your grid becomes. So that's just sort of one of the key concepts I want to bring across. So with behind the meter alternative generation, essentially devalues the grid. So the more behind the meter generation there is, the less grid revenue a municipality gets, and the less reliant customers become of your grid. So it devalues your grid, it lowers the importance. And with lowering the importance, you as a municipality would need to increase the price of your grid prices to cover for that grid defection. And when the prices of the grid services would increase, essentially it will increase the defection of the grid. And how wheeling creates value for the grid is that the more generators that are able to wheel, the lower the price will be for energy, because there's more competition. Lower prices will increase demand, so and your grid becomes very important in enabling this demand to grow. And it also secures your revenue for grid service in the future. So I think it's a quite important just concept. It's not entirely the industry view, but I think it's a very important concept to think through, is that behind the meter generation devalues your grid, and wheeling generation increases the value of your grid and the importance. So to chat about sort of that industry perspective is industry is looking for bankability. So bankability, just to give the straight definition, is when a project is considered financially viable, low risk, and attractive to lenders and investors. So banks and investors are willing to finance it because the risks are manageable and the returns are predictable. So for energy projects, it's about whether a project can secure debt and equity funding to build and operate successfully. And in simple terms, the IPP wants to be paid every month. So they want to build the infrastructure and want to be able to recuperate the cost of operating that facility and sufficient additional revenue to service the debt or the equity that's part of that. So how would a project be bankable? So it's essentially around what is a successful operation. So a customer generator would want to inject electricity into the grid, and the customer that they are supplying that electricity to must pay them. So let's look at that. So there's a generator that's connected to the NECOM transmission network, and they're selling to a customer in the municipality. So the kilowatt hours essentially flows through the grid. It's not exactly how the kilowatt hours flows, and I think that's part of the training you received. It's probably to understand that concept that wheeling is more about the financial transactions. But let's look at how a project would be bankable. So the customer and the generator sign a power purchase agreement outlining how many kilowatt hours are going to flow to them and at what price. So this is the conceptual sort of contract that's signed here of how much kilowatt hours this generator is supplying the customer, and the customer needs to pay that contracted amount in the power purchase agreement. So the challenge becomes when would the customer pay the generator if they don't receive the credit from the municipality? So we know that the WEPS credit needs to be passed on all the way to the customer. And if the customer doesn't get that WEPS credit, would they then settle that power purchase agreement with the generator? And then the generator relies on NECOM and the municipality to make the process flow bankable. So it is important that all partners within the wheeling transaction needs to play along to ensure that the values are shared in the way that it needs to be, and the generator have the certainty that they would essentially be paid every month, and certainty that the credit that needs to be passed on is passed on every month. And that makes the sort of project bankable. So what does industry need to make a project bankable? So, and it's just highlighting on the process of municipality. So they need clear contracts standardized contracts clearly defining roles, responsibilities, and liability provisions. And I believe in this week you all saw the standardized documentation that was developed by the Western Cape government and shared with everyone that helps with getting over the line and this sort of contracting aspect. Transparent tariffs and fee structures. So published wheeling tariffs and fees, or a clear modern method for crediting. So very clear tariffs to know that, well, if they transact into this municipality, this is what the fees will be, monthly fees for admin, and this is how the crediting would work, and so forth. Then settlement and reconciliation rules, so timelines and when would settlement and reconciliation happen, and the treatment of imbalances, how would that be treated? And then efficient metering and data processing, so accuracy in terms of how data is calculated, and then a clear dispute process. So these are some of the clear things that industry needs to know to make a project bankable. And it's a lot reliant on how the municipalities and all the distributors treat a lot of these transactions. So they want clarity, transparency, predictability, and efficiency. And if the municipalities can provide this, really becomes investable and scalable. So that's how it becomes bankable for industry. So maybe just to chat around quickly and around the numbers for bankability. So IPPs compete with NECOM WEPs, excluding losses, which is, as you've learned through the week, the avoided cost to wheel, or the rate that is credited to customers who purchase wheeled energy. So up here we have the local authority WEPs rates up, and yeah, for let's say solar power during summer, this is essentially what would be credit, the 147 cents per kilowatt hour, or 147 rand per kilowatt hour. So that's the sort of upper margin of what the IPP or generators need to compete with. And then here on the left at the bottom, we have work that was done by Meridian a couple of years ago, just on the LCOE. So the LCOE is called the levelized cost of energy. So that is the equivalent cost of generating for a kilowatt hour for a plant. That takes into account the debt servicing, the maintenance, the upfront capital that was invested, and over the lifetime of the project, what it costs to generate a single kilowatt hour. So that's the LCOE. And you can see that sits somewhere for wind and solar, let's say in the 60 cents range. And it will decrease as the demand grows and as they call it learning rate increases. So that's the how big demand there is and how much better the manufacturing comes and cheaper the manufacturing becomes due to sort of that international demand. So what a generator would want to do is somewhere between their LCOE and what the rate is of WEPs, they would want to set their PPA price, so that they gain revenue from generating, and they also then have a competitive advantage of competing with the other generators in the market. Currently, the main generator in the market is NECOM, and the WEPs excluding losses prices is what they're competing with. And then just a quick example of how IPPs manage risk, and it's a concept that's quite important in terms of a lot of the IPPs and traders would come to you and ask quite a lot of questions around your process and how things would work. And they can technically solve quite a lot of their sort of problems by building that into their tariffs. So if they can quantify risks, so understand how long it would be for settlement to happen, or have an understanding of how much grid downtime there is, they can quantify that and they can build that risk into the tariff to reduce the risk of defaulting on the loans or need to secure. And if they can't quantify it, they might avoid the PPA. And I think that's where we've been for a couple of years, is where they can't necessarily define the risk that they need to quantify, and unfortunately could not necessarily go into the stage of signing a PPA. So it comes back to industry wants clarity, transparency, predictability, and efficiency. So here's just a quick example of how they would look at risk and how they would price maybe risk in some scenarios. So the LCOE I use here is for 66 cents. The PPA price that they, for example, could offer is 90 cents. And in a low risk scenario, they might adjust that 90 cents to 98 cents to de-risk the project. And then in a high risk scenario, they could then adjust the risk PPA price a lot higher to, let's say, R1.30, still underneath the web rate there. And then essentially have an additional buffer of revenue they gather to quantify that or recuperate the risk of something going wrong. So some things that could go wrong is, like I mentioned, credits not being passed on time, or grid downtime, or mismatches from the customer side. And if there's a high risk of that happening, they would increase the PPA price they have so that there is coverage for it. And it comes down to the willing buyer, willing seller. They would then sign that deal with the customer if they are willing to do that. And I think they would have clear terms in terms of how they quantify that risk. So for an example of the low risk and high risk is that essentially the amount of additional revenue they gather becomes a bit more. And then that is often applied to different types of products, whether it's insurance, whether it is for a working capital facility to make sure that even in a scenario where, let's say, 1 or 2 months there is a mismatch and they lose out on quite a lot of their sales to that specific customer, due to many reasons, they have that working capital facility to still operate and maintain their facility. And then one of the, another perspective in terms of this is that the wheeling has been for some time a bit of a chicken egg situation, where there's quite a low confidence in the system and very few PPAs are signed. And I think that the NERSA rules is helping quite a lot. The trader rules is going to help quite a lot. The implementation of a lot of the frameworks from municipalities is helping. But what I've often seen in the market is that IPPs are looking for off-takers. They start engaging with customers in municipalities or in NECOM. I'm using municipalities specifically as the example here. And then the customer said, well, yeah, I'll sign that PPA if you show me the municipal framework and show that the municipality is ready to go. And then the IPP would engage with the municipality, and the municipality said, well, we'll develop a framework if there's a PPA. And then it's a bit of a chicken egg situation where both parties need to see the other party ready to go before they are willing to take the next step. And then IPPs are like, oh, we don't necessarily think we can take this risk of signing a PPA in an area where both parties are hesitant. So they look at a new municipality, look for new off-takers, and start engaging with different customers in other municipalities, and then sort of get stuck in that loop of low confidence in the system. So things like this training is helping with the confidence in the system. The wheeling rules from NERSA is helping with the system and so forth. And I think that also the confidence from everyone in terms of the technical knowledge of how wheeling would work is helping improve this. But in the early sort of stages of wheeling, what we're seeing is that partnership between industry and municipalities and NECOM is where the success is happening. So wheeling is actually still quite new. Like there's a lot of things to figure out, and different municipalities have different processes and systems, and customers have different types of loads. There's different types of generation that all needs to meet and make it a success. So all the examples of successful wheeling started as a pilot and a partnership between a distributor and the private sector in some way. Nelson Mandela Bay with PowerX. It's Eskom and Vodacom for virtual wheeling. George Municipality with Empower in South Africa. City of Cape Town with their pilot with Ventana, Empower and Equities Property Fund, and so forth. And there is sort of that common understanding with the piloting phase that the parties will strategically and jointly ramp up the complexity until it becomes operational, and then all parties being aware that it will be a bumpy ride. And then working towards that consistency and transparency so that the risk can be low. So that is essentially one of the main things of success is this partnering. And before we get stuck in this loop, is that one of these participants in this chain would essentially say, well, let's figure this out together. And I think a key message was well sort of from what industry is looking for is that transparency and that clearness of how the process would work. So we saw earlier Aisha presenting on the virtual wheeling stuff, and there's a lot of information, and that gives industry a lot of certainty on how the process would work. What happens? How long does it take for settlement? Okay, it takes 45 days to 60 days. That's quite long. Okay, but if that is consistent, that is fine. But if it's uncertain of how long it would take, that is a problem. Then they can't quantify the risk. But if they know that the risk is 45 to 60 days, they can act on that. So a lot of it is figuring out together what is the space where a municipality is comfortable operating, and then partnering and piloting with a private sector partner that can help you work through that process. And they are aware that they are taking sort of additional risk, but enabling the sector. I think what often also happens is that municipalities get overwhelmed by the amount of questions and amount of almost a negotiating that happens in these transactions or these wheeling framework discussions, especially if you don't have a framework locked down. And what you need to take into account is that industry has quite a bit of means and resources to help you figure that out. So it is about, and they might be pushing quite hard in certain senses because they want to keep that risk as low as they can and be more competitive in terms of what they can offer in terms of a price. And if you see there is a lot of uncertainty or high risk, that price might be higher or they would not necessarily transact. So like I said, the success we see in the initial partnering and piloting. So that's what we're sort of encouraging with a lot of the municipalities who want to enter into this wheeling journey is to be open to having these discussions with IPPs and find out the environment where you are comfortable to start partnering and piloting and figuring out the processes to enable this. And like I said, the private sector is keen to participate. They just need to have that transparency and consistency in the future, but they're willing to take a few steps to meet you halfway in a lot of those scenarios. I think that's it from my side. And I think the key message is just to say that it is quite exciting and wheeling is still new and we're all still figuring it out. Training like this helps us sort of bridge those barriers of understanding, and the private sector is also quite willing to meet municipalities in the areas where they are comfortable operating. So be quite clear when you do communicate with the private sectors to say that, well, this is what we are willing to do from our side in terms of our billing systems or consolidation times and so forth, and make sure that you remain comfortable in these conversations. And they're always going to push and try and de-risk from their side, but and be comfortable to also say, well, we are unsure about this. Let's discuss it in more ways. And then we're welcome to pull in experts on the topic on these type of things. There's quite a few people within NECOM who speak to the other municipalities who are already busy with Scorny presenting earlier, or Aisha who presented earlier. They've thought through a lot of these problems to get their inputs on how those complexities might work. Yeah. Thanks. That's sort of my message for the day.
Hey, I'm on mute. Excellent. Thank you so much, Johan. Great presentation. Of course, I have only time for 2 questions. Colleagues, are there any questions? Or I provide my own assessment? No hands. Is it because it's a Friday? So really on my side, Johan, what I gathered from your presentation is, if municipalities allow wheeling, it increases the value of your grid, of their grid, like you mentioned, because they've got this conduit which can be used to transfer electrons from one point to the other, and then from that perspective, it increases customer retention, You mentioned for private sector, bankability is key. And you define it nicely. It's clarity, transparency, predictability, and efficiency. And of course, we know that in our municipal context, some of our municipalities need to work towards that. It's not impossible in some municipalities. I'm sure all those boxes are ticked, but we need to work towards that. And another nice thing that you mentioned, is that if municipalities improve their grid operations, they can reduce the risk on these projects, which ultimately decrease to an extent that PPA price and makes it favorable for all parties involved, which is excellent. And then you mentioned the chicken and egg scenario, which we must break. And you've shown examples that in other municipalities, private sector has been willing to help to break that cycle. And it's a model that we should apply in other municipalities. So excellent on my side. Any questions, colleagues? That means it was great. Thanks, Johan, for your time.
Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks, and thanks everyone. Bye-bye.
No problem. So, colleagues, we have to switch gear a bit now. We have to switch gear a bit, and we need to start preparing for life after the training, if I may call it that. We need to start preparing for life after the training. So the next presentation is Shirley, which we are all familiar with. She's been with us the entire week and holding us and, teaching us these concepts. So what happens when a municipality receives a wheeling application? What happens when an industry person knocks on your desk, knocks on your door, sits on your desk, and they say, this is the application? So Shirley, are you around to tell us what do we do when you are in that scenario?
Hi everyone, good. It's still morning. Good morning. Yeah. Okay. So let me share my presentation. Can you see my screen?
Yes. There
Okay,
we go.
let me put it on screen mode. So we're going back a little bit here, and as Sanoa says, this is now to say, okay, I've got this wheeling transaction. So first step obviously is the policy has been approved by your council and it's aligned with the NERSA rules. You've allocated resources, and I think when we heard Aisha speak earlier in the week, there was mention that you don't need to put a whole department, but at least allocate 1 or 2 people that becomes your sort of wheeling one-stop shop, and they will deal with us. Then you need to have an application system in place, including a checklist of documentation. And the next slide, we're going to hopefully have a little bit of an interactive session where we will be getting inputs into what people would like to have or think is necessary to have in this checklist. So that's always useful. You give your checklist, you say to the party, okay, you want to do wheeling, please provide all of the following information. You don't get it in dribs and drabs because they give you one thing and then you say, no, I need something else. Try and get this checklist in place. It helps you. It will also help the parties in ensuring that they provide the correct information. You would have also had your tariffs approved by your council and NERSA. You will have a suite of contracts in place, as we've discussed earlier, your supply agreements or your amendments to your supply agreements. And if it's a generator connected to your grid, the generator connection agreements. You would have your billing system configured, or you would put a manual process in place. And we touched, when Keith spoke about it, he says it's very possible to do this outside of your billing system, but and at least to load the data manually. Now you've received this application and all the information has been provided, and you can now proceed. So you now update the customer's electricity supply agreement, or you do an amendment to that supply agreement, and you may need to also do a tariff change if necessary. So one of the requirements is that these customers should be on time of use tariffs. If they're not on one, you would need to maybe convert them to this tariff change, to the tariff applicable. Then you may need to do a quotation. That could be done at the same time as the supply agreement being updated. But for example, if you're going to have metering, for example, to be installed, you might need to quote the customer if you want that customer to pay for it. It depends on what type of metering is installed. Then in the little dotted block, this is dealing with if the generator is now connected to NECOM. So if the wheeling is from a NECOM connected generator, the municipality will need to engage with NECOM to amend the supply agreement. I know when I was in NECOM, we would get RPPs that would go directly to the municipality or directly to NECOM to amend the supply agreement. But of course, the RPP has no standing in this case because the supply agreement is with the municipality. So obviously through all of this engagement where the customer applies, they will have noted that this is generators connected to NECOM, and therefore the municipality needs to start engagements then with NECOM to amend the supply agreement. And then this gets signed, and then the generator builds, or there's an existing generator, and wheeling starts to take place because all of the agreements are in place. The Munich account is then credited with the wheeled energy if the generator is connected to NECOM, and then the off-taker's account is credited with the wheeled energy whether it's connected to NECOM or connected to the generator. If the generator is connected within the municipality will obviously use the generator's data. And if it's connected to NECOM, it will use the data that NECOM supplies when they do the credit on the customer's bill. So just a question to anyone, and I can't see hands, so Sanoa, if you could assist me here. Is there anything that we've missed? This is very high level, obviously lots of detail under each one of these, but is there anything you feel that has been missed in this process? Are there no hands?
No hands.
Okay, so yeah, this is just a general guideline, and when you're developing your wheeling one-stop shop, all the things that need to be there. Okay, so the next step is this checklist. So what should be in the checklist? And here we've left it deliberately empty, and I'm going to get out of I can't, sorry, I'm trying to get out of slideshow mode. Anyway, we can make notes then. What do you feel should be in this checklist? So this is the form of the checklist. What is the document that needs to be supplied? give a short explanation of what this document is, who signs it off, and has it been provided, yes or no? And you basically would say, and you must provide all of this information in order for us to process the application. If it's not all provided, you send it back. Okay, some thoughts.
Quick question on my side. So when you say application letter, is it the application form
or application form? Yes, sorry.
Is it, or maybe the acknowledgement of the application? So for example, if someone sends an application form, right, tick, then would the municipality have to acknowledge receipt of that in writing?
I would assume so. So who signs off or whatever, it's acknowledged receipt. I just can't get out of this.
Maybe.
Okay,
What about
I've
escape?
managed to now. Okay, so we could. So this could be the application form. And
Yeah. Colleagues, this is an interactive session.
yeah.
This is for us to co-create, of course, the checklists. So the key elements or the key items that we need to check as we process a wheeling transaction or wheeling application.
Okay, maybe technical feasibility.
For the generator. Would it be an application for the generator?
Well, you first need to now analyze, because the application form will have the generator and the proposed off-takers on. So you'd probably have to just check and make sure that your off-takers are on the correct tariffs. And for your generator, you need to check technical feasibility.
This would be what tariff is the off-taker on?
There should be time of use. I think we've established that.
Okay. Okay. Yes, but they might be on the off-taker might be currently on not a time of use tariff.
Do you want to check the off-taker's account, whether they're in good standing? You want to check that? Is it useful? That's my question.
Let's put it in. You could also say off-taker agreement. Does it need updating? Because I know some would be very old.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I think maybe the correct document there would be the electricity supply agreement for the off-taker. But yeah, if you want to call it off-taker agreement, I think we all understand.
Yeah, agreed. Would you need information like no, I
You
don't.
can also,
yeah.
you can also use the chat, colleagues. I just want to say the colleagues, if you are shy to speak, you can use the chat.
Can I chip in there, Shirley, and just ask, do you have to have an approved tariff in place, or is it sufficient with the NERSA rules just to be able to apply the WEPS credit approach? So when you say, does your customer, if they're not on a time of use, do they just go to the next nearest time of use for their customer category, or is there like a specific wheeling charge that applies?
I suppose this is only if the municipality has got a policy that says it must be
WEPS credit, or
policy requires this. Sorry, it's my typing.
But I suppose what I'm asking is under the rules, you don't need to get a wheeling tariff approved. You can simply apply the WEPS credit. Is that correct?
No, I think NERSA still wants you to apply to NERSA for that WEPS credit.
Okay, so that would be quite a key. It's not really the checklist from getting it in, but it's a critical step is to do that in your next tariff application.
Because it's done on time of use. So it sort of becomes a given. It's done on time of use, even though you might not be on a time of use tariff.
Sorry, Shirley, maybe just a question regarding the context of this, because what should be in the checklist, and this checklist is assuming.
The checklist will.
Well, no, I'm saying assuming you've got a policy and a framework in place and approved at the municipality, you've got a tariff in place for wheeling, whether it be a one-liner that says you will apply WEPS credit for wheeling, whatever the case might be. So then you've got the context. So that's where we're at the moment. And then the checklist is, okay, now I've received my first, well, somebody says he wants to wheel. Then we use this checklist to say, okay, we go down the checklist and make sure everything is checked on there. Is that the correct context where we're at?
Yes, agreed. It's basically to help you to make sure you've got all the documentation and all the information. So another one would be, is the generator connected to NECOM? So so then you would know, because the generator is connected to NECOM, you would this would require engagement with NECOM.
I see on the chat, Johan is saying 3-year projected data study units to be wheeled or taken by a customer, like a projection of some sort. And its generation and usage.
The off-taker and the generator?
Yes.
Okay, it's just the off-taker, I suppose.
The off-taker,
off-taker, 3-year cost provided.
Yeah, but surely the generator would also want to, he's going to provide information on the size of the generation unit that he wants to connect to the network, but surely he needs to also provide some kind of forecasts with regards to his generation.
Okay. So would that fall under technical feasibility?
I think, like the technical feasibility would probably have a few sub steps or maybe even a full sub checklist under it. You can probably do the same with a lot of the other items as well, group them as one big item, but then they have lots of sub items. So I think the checklist might become, it might become a bit long. But I hear what you're trying to do, or see what you're trying to do, is just to have the basics on here, and then you can always expand it later.
Yeah, it's just basic. I mean, this is, yeah, so this has, for example, the technical feasibility has the generator applied for connection. So if you're looking at a generator in a Munich, you've got two parties. You've got the generator that's would have had to apply. And then you've got your off-taker. So I think this is sort of concentrating on the off-taker side of it, but it is important whether the generator is actually applied for connection or is connected. Yeah. And then proof.
Is there a point? Oh, let me wait.
Yeah, sorry. Yes.
I was saying, let me wait for you to finish. I was saying, is there a point where the municipality itself assesses its risk profile? For example, how would you do that? For example, am I indebted to NECOM? Yes or no? Or maybe we're assuming the customer would not come if you are indebted to NECOM. That self-assessment, and also where the end user or the off-taker is connected, right? What kind of network do I have there? Is it the network with some redundancy or not? Because in the previous presentation, there was a risk thing. So how do you then self-assess that? I want to.
Yeah. So this would be.
I want to just add something to that, which is that, if you like a smallish rural Munich, but with one large mine, and that mine, there's a big plant built just to supply that mine inside your network. So getting the sort of relative proportion of that IPP.
Okay, so here we're trying to deal with the off-taker, not the IPP itself. So the IPP, to me, is a separate process.
Okay.
Which that checklist can be 10 times as long as this one. I suppose the first thing is application form provided. So the application form is going to have a lot of information in it, but you will pull out of that application form, and we can also look at what NECOM provided. You pull out of the application form the documents that you would need. So the application form would include the customer's account number, the NMD, and all of that in the form itself. But then this is sort of your checklist to make sure you've got all the information needed to proceed further.
Bernard is asking if metering upgrades are required on generator, if it's in the Munich off-taker side, like metering upgrades maybe.
If the generator exists or is new?
If the metering upgrades required on generator, if it's connected to the municipality, or are metering upgrades required on the off-taker side for wheeling?
So yeah. So here it says, okay, so let's put that as a question. Is a metering upgrade required? Okay.
Colleagues, please use the chat to ask to add some inputs or raise your hand. It would be nice to have a full room of participation.
I'm going to put your metering/network upgrade required because it could be both. Just going to make this a bit smaller. so we can fit more in. This doesn't have to be an exhaustive list. I think the reason we're going through this is to give you an idea of, because you don't want, for example, the person doing an application form, then you pick up the generator is not even connected. Then you have to go back to them and ask them, we noticed you didn't fill in this information, and then you didn't provide this, and you didn't provide that. So this is just making sure that everything is filled in the application form and you have all the documentation required in order to get to the next step. I don't know, we can maybe stop here unless anybody's got other information, but I think it's just to give, as I said, an idea that you would need some kind of a checklist. It helps the off-takers and it'll help you. I don't know, I'm guided by you, Sanoa.
Yeah, I just have a question, so maybe you can clarify for me. So I would assume if, for example, there is interest to will, right? There would then be the process, for example, where the customer initiates the interest in the form of completion of an application form. Done, right? And then there is preparation. There's preparation before, I can call it, before the electrons, the willing electrons start flowing, right? So which is a lot of the stuff that we have here. Is there anything else post that? Post, for example, now that we've signed the various agreements and etc., we're okay. Is there anything post that? I guess it's billing.
It'll be billing, correct.
Then
billing, checking.
Your billing configured. Have you allocated a new tariff to this particular customer or something? Okay. Just asking generally. Any other?
Somebody posted.
Internal stakeholder approval by relevant internal stakeholders. So shopping it with your internal decision makers. George Municipality. Megan says that you're in the room. Are we missing anything? Colleagues from George, we are at your mercy here, please. George Municipality, are you able to say what kind of checklist you use on your side? This checklist is critical, colleagues, because once you start wheeling on your side, you want to at least have some skeleton or something that guides you, that is practical, where you know that this process is incomplete if certain things have not been accounted for. And also, if you forget some of the content we were teaching this week, once you look at that checklist, it's gonna, remind you a bit of what needs to be done. So if you can add something, you think of something, just let us know. Or else.
Do you, Sanoa, yes. Sorry, do you see this checklist as maybe being part of the policy document as an annexure to it?
Megan, let me pass that question to Megan. What do you think, Megan?
I would say very much so. I think surely what we would need to do is just check the application form again. So I think we drafted that template one. I think it's, I said in the chat, it's either, I can't remember, George, is it from Overberg or Langeberg, Overstrand or Langeberg? But so that's got some of it. But I think this will be a useful, it'll sort of become almost like a control doc and get a little bit more filled out, and each Munich should then be encouraged to also put literally the name of the person who signs off each step, kind of thing, and so it becomes really your roadmap. But I think it'd be really useful when Munich's develop it to put it into as an addendum to their policy and an addendum to the application form, actually. So because I think one of the things the rules stipulate is that there really needs to be complete transparency between the municipality and the customer on this. So that's the other thing it would need to have, is a bit of a time frame as well, actually, you know.
Yeah.
Are we in a position to propose a time frame for such transaction yet?
I think the Munich can put timeframes to it, because they could typically say this will take 6 months, 2 months, or whatever. Depending on resources. My question is, I know as part of this training that sort of a draft policy document needs to be provided, and maybe it would be useful for just as part of this draft checklist as well. And going back to the application forms and looking what information is needed by the application forms, and then creating your checklist based on that.
Agreed.
Okay, I'll update the slide, and so people have got an example. I mean, this is not necessarily what it's going to look like, but this is just an example of what you would want to put on your checklist. And then when we share the presentations, we'll give this as an example. Thanks. Okay, back to you, Sanoa, unless somebody else has got other comments.
It's for, you know, where the checklist, and Munich should amend it as they see fit going forward. But it's our recommendation to have that as part of your policy document. All right. Thank you, Shirley. I think, yeah, next thing for us is to start, well, first thing for myself is to leave the stage. It's been a great couple of days with you colleagues. I'm quite impressed that we've hit the 100 mark, even today on a Friday. But we've had an insightful day today where colleagues, Bongani started off the morning really with giving us the blueprint of how to implement wheeling in a municipality. And then City of Cape Town brought to us a case study where you can take the approaches we've been discussing and make them more detailed and more granular in preparation, you know, for tariff modernization and the upcoming markets, you know, which we didn't discuss in this meeting. And then virtual wheeling was introduced to us as a solution, and one of NECOM's solution, which is also quite interesting. We discussed that in detail. And then, of course, industry perspective. In a nutshell, industry perspective, what Johan was saying was that, you know, there is interest in industry to wheel and industry is willing to assist municipalities to wheel. So let us open our doors as municipalities. Let us allow industry to come in and let us have the conversation. Let us find each other. And of course, Shirley just then finalized now with a nice checklist for us. Now we brought it to a practical sense to say, now, after all of this, what is it that we need to do? So then going forward from here, Megan is going to sort of finalize all of our learnings, consolidate all of our learnings from this week. And then she's going to speak to what some of the next steps. And then she'll get into a final quiz. Of course, remember, this is the CPD accredited.
So now your mic seems to have gone off.
Can't hear me.
You're breaking up, so now I think you've said that's it.
Okay, peace. My mic, I don't know. So that's it for me.
So now we're signing off. Okay, Shirley, did you're okay there with the checklist? So okay, great. So Sinawa is signing off there. So thank you so much, Sinawa, and thanks Shirley for pulling that together at the end. Before I get into the final closing bit, I wanted to just say, so when Sinawa did the quiz this morning, there was a kind of sense of like, there was a very positive sense that there wasn't a lot in the blue of like, we're completely clueless. But there was a sort of half of you in the orange zone and half in the red zone of sort of, oh dear, day 3 was a bit confusing. There's still concepts that are confusing. So we've got a little bit of time now for Q&A. I noticed that people are quite quiet, and I know it's Friday and people, we don't want to keep you too long. But I did want to just open the floor up. We have got, in the room, there's quite a lot of faculty that sits, that firstly have a lot of experience. So we've got Shirley, we've got Josh Dippenaar. There's also people who are really engaged with the NECOM working group. So we've got Johan in the room, we've got Bernard Tutenberg in the room, we've got Doc Valentine in the room. There's Roy Vinant, there's I'm looking at the names sort of rapidly, but there's a lot of people who are sitting on those NECOM working groups. So this is an opportunity either to raise anything red flaggy or just to say, help, this area is still challenging, or say, if there's really nothing still bothering you, then say so. It's the final countdown. Okay, if I miss anyone's hand, would one of my colleagues just shout? And maybe just going through this will also just help pull it. Roy, yeah, please come in, Roy.
Megan, before people start leaving, and probably I'm jumping the gun a little bit here, can I just make a closing remark in terms of the 4 days that we've had? If you
Roy,
remember,
that would be absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much.
If you remember right at the start.
But please note that people can't leave because the closeout and evaluation, all the resources are coming now and they are part of the accreditation. But yes.
Thanks, Megan. If you remember at the start of the first day, my co-chair was a CWA, made a couple of opening remarks and welcomes. When I joined the NECOM group, the capacity building task team group some 6 months ago, and the concept of a wheeling sort of course was being discussed by the work group members, I remember at the time thinking, oh, this is going to be difficult for a lot of the municipalities. They're very understaffed. They're going to struggle to attend a 4-day course. Well, to say that I'm sort of at a loss for words would be very unusual for Roy, because I can talk at the drop of a hat. The fact that we've had an average of over 100 people for the first 3 days and 94 at the moment is just absolutely outstanding. And clearly the content of the course and the speakers have attracted the numbers. And just on behalf of the task team, I'll be as quick as I can. Putting the course together and in attracting the outstanding speakers that we've had has been worth every minute of that task team. So on behalf of Buzasiwe and myself and all the task team members, I think this training, this NECOM arranged training, has just absolutely been outstanding. I think some of the municipalities are far advanced compared to others, but those that are struggling will have seen that it's not an impossible task, that with the right guidance, with the right draft documents to work on, and I'm sure some of the municipalities will be stealing from George and from Cape Town, but being part of the AMU, that's what we do. We assist each other and we try and not reinvent the wheel across 160 municipalities. So Megan, to you and the team that has put this all together on behalf of the sort of working group, a huge thank you from myself and Buzasiwe. And it only bodes well for wheeling going into the future. So to all the speakers, if I mention one or two, I'll forget some others, but especially to people like Shirley who have had decades of experience in ESCOM, thank you very much to all of you. And Megan, I'm sure you'll thank the speakers as well. So that's enough from me. I'll be handing back to you to do the formal closings and making sure that people tick all the boxes to get their CPD. I'm not sure how I'm going to get mine because I don't work for a municipality, but I'm sure that you'll take pity on me, and because I've stayed for the full 4 days, you might sneak me a bit of CPD. But Megan, thank you. I'll be signing off now. I'll be closing my mic and staying on.
Wonderful. Roy, thank you so much. And I have to say it's an incredibly supportive NECOM working group. And I think from all of the municipalities that just to say as a, NECOM is comprised of all of you people in the field and have done a remarkable job. So enormous thanks. And indeed the speakers and those of you who were on the webinar, just realizing that Shirley's in huge demand at the moment, and there's something about the fact that she's put this dedicated time aside with us. I think it's incredible. So Shirley, I think you really spearheaded the faculty, but to all of the speakers, thanks very, very much. So yeah, as I said, thanks. And it was interesting to me that particularly today, almost every speaker was in fact from a NECOM working group. But I think over the course of the week, most of the people we have seen have dedicated time into NECOM. And this is NECOM feeding back into capacitating the country. Bongani Mandla began this morning saying the energy landscape is changing. And there's no two ways around that. And then we concluded the day with Johan saying, look, wheeling is quite a lot of a better business case for utilities because you don't lose those network costs. So, the appeal is please take this very seriously. The rules are there and you would be against your license conditions if you didn't get your wheeling frameworks in place. And we really hope the week has enabled you to do that. And I think, as Roy pointed out, there was, incredible input from the Munichs that have forged ahead. And there was really a very open offer of sort of, please reach out. They're there to help you. So that culture in South Africa, which, very much centers around the AMU and SALGA, is one of the things that I think is amazing about working in the sector is at the officials level, people are just incredibly helpful and supportive of each other. There's an amazing network. I think that something that stood out for me, which Johan said, was that wheeling is in fact very high risk for the customer. So on the one hand, there's been a lot of concern that some of those customers are not paying their full charges. And I think we've cleared up that there is absolutely no revenue loss. There is a slight balance responsibility loss that doesn't get captured in a wheeling context that will be captured in the market. And I think the context is very much where those one-on-one physical wheeling agreements, they're not, you're not going to get hundreds and hundreds of applications. They are very high risk. So you're starting already to see customers moving to pooling and aggregation. We heard quite a bit of that today. And I think that when the market does open, it's going to offer, in the long term, as it gains momentum, it's going to offer a place that balances out responsibility and risk far better than the wheeling space necessarily does it. And that's why we're moving to a market. But I think there is a place for wheeling. Johan was very clear that customers have got a lot of there can be international pressures, economic pressures to have renewable energy, to have that kind of price certainty. So it's very much a part of your quiver of sort of what you can offer your customers. And I really liked what Aisha brought in both her presentations, was that Eskom is seeing this as an opportunity to offer new services to customers. So you can't sit back complacently anymore in this changing energy landscape. You have to develop new skills and new offers to your customers. And obviously you need to be paid for that. So that's something you need to think about. But that's the context we're in. And I think that I think George sort of identified this in his question today. Yes, there's the steps of putting the framework together. You need to get your policy in place. You need to reach out to your customers fairly proactively, actually. You need to have a sense of who's likely to wheel in time and what's the scale of that, because you need to start building it into your costing. And you need to get your tariffs in place. So these are things you need to do immediately. The rules require this of you. And then you need to start piloting your billing and metering, but you need to think about how you're going to do that. That's your framework. Their particular policy matters. We'll go into that just now, but I think we bedded down things like, yes, you've got to be on a time of use tariff. You need probably WEP's credit is the initial way to go for most people. That piloting, even Johan from the industry perspective said, look, the industry is very happy with piloting and phasing in. You know, there's risks on both sides, and everyone would like to first trial and test it, operationalize it before sort of rushing in. So that's a very acceptable approach. And then today we concluded with Shirley taking us through a checklist. When you actually get an application, how do you start activating that application? So those are the kind of the bits and pieces that you need to go through. And then as we bring this course to an end, I want to just pull you to we've talked about accreditation, and we got a positive response from AMEU, from EXA through AMEU saying, yes, the course probably will be accredited, so it's looking highly likely. And I think it'll be roughly about 3 CPD points. But there are requirements. So, you know, EXA takes it very seriously. So we need you to fill out the training evaluation form and the tracking survey. It's not actually a quiz on today's content, but we do want to get some tracking in place as to where you're at the moment, but also how useful the training was. As I said, Busisiwe from the working group, right from get-go said, look, they want to check that this really does have impact. So we'd like you to fill that out. And please also note that we will follow up in about a month's time to see what has been done on the ground. So you need to fill that out today. We'll put the link, Nick will put the link on the chat right now. It's in the slide there, Nick, but if you could, well, maybe I can just do that. Anyway, we'll see. And then we need from you a draft wheeling policy and requirements document. So, you know, we appreciate that you won't have time to go and take that through your internal stakeholder approval process, but we'd like it at the state of readiness that you will then take through your internal approval process. So that is a requirement. We need that submitted. And then ideally also your billing recon tool, that you've played around with that you've got a bit of customization going there. And a little heads up that Nick has in fact made the tool even more snazzy. So the very final sheet of the tool has now got a template bill, and you just need to put your logo in there. It pulls all the data through from the tool, and it's actually ready to print and you know, give to your customer. I know we heard today about the automation and the next steps, and obviously that would need to happen, particularly in bigger Munichs where you might have more than 1 or 2 bills to do, and to give your billing people kind of confidence. But I think this a basic Excel sheet is the way Eskom began, so there's absolutely no problem with that. These need to be submitted to us by the end of September. So we're giving you 2 weeks. So the reason it's 2 weeks is because there's not really a lot to do, actually. We've been through a lot of it today. Please submit those to nick@sustainable.org.za. We will share these slides with you. Nick is who you've been communicating with all along. Obviously, not all of you are from a municipality. So, you know, when you fill out the evaluation form, we will know that, and then we won't be expecting you to submit your draft policy. So, Roy, it's okay for you not to submit a draft policy, but you're very welcome to help any of your municipal colleagues if they need help. And as I said, NECOM is going to do a follow-up in about 1 or 2 months' time. You might get another Google form out the blue saying, okay, so did you take it through the processes with council and so on? This is just a quick reminder. What is this going to require of you? You know, Josh took you through this in quite a lot of detail, and the template policy is there for you. It's got on the front page what are the we've got 6 key decisions that you still need to take. They're highlighted in the text, green and yellow, and you can decide, you know, do you want to go with it or not go with it? And you literally just need to make a decision and adjust the text. So it's really color by numbers, and the key decisions are outlined for you. I think that it's important to remember that this sort of option 1 and option 2 is not usually an either or, but a phased suggestion. So by saying, like, we want to start with just Eskom connected generators because we're a little anxious about the embedded gen side, that's okay, as long as you indicate that, you know, ultimately you would enable that. And similarly, customers, you might decide you only want to start with the offtake being at the MV level and above. But I think there was a nice suggestion that you would say that, you know, any voltage level is possible, but that would have to be considered at a sort of at the director level. And I think Aisha made a very good point today that they, you know, if it's at that low voltage level, they're not going to do customer by customer. They're going to do it at a kind of pooled or an aggregated level. So we'll all learn as we go along. We've talked about the tariffs a lot. The WEPS credit is effectively, even though it was more complex sounding from Courtney, it's the same thing. If you apply that, you won't lose revenue. But we do know that we will over time need to move to those more explicit use of system charges and unbundled tariffs for all sorts of reasons, not only to do with wheeling. Interestingly, today we heard from City of Cape Town about half-hourly summation. But Eskom's still saying that they're still doing monthly time of use themselves, although they would like over time to move to an hourly summation. So very strong that you've got to be in time of use. The summations will all be against time of use. You can do that monthly. The hourly or half hourly is much more reflective of the kind of more balanced, responsible type of situation that you would get in the market. So again, you know, the recommendation obviously would be for admin purposes, start monthly, but you might want to write into your policy that over time you might migrate to an hourly or half hourly situation. And we talked quite a lot about the surplus generation and how to handle that. So those are the big key areas. And then just some other thoughts and ideas that I think came through from some of the speakers. Eskom mentioned the length of contract, so to include a start and an end date, and I think there was a kind of suggestion that you sort of take three-year bites out of the cherry. But I think you will all have captured the notes on that. That initially you might be doing a kind of traditional wheeling, but that ultimately you may move to exploring more of this kind of pooled or aggregated or portfolio wheeling, in the sense that if low voltage customers do sort of enter into that space, it's unlikely that you're going to be doing a one-on-one like heavy duty agreements for lots of small customers. We heard quite a bit about the 3-year forecasting from the generator and the off-taker that came up again today. And we all need to be kind of getting into this mode, I think, of having much more line of sight of what's going on. I think Eskom introduced the really kind of positive idea about the institutional adjustments that they've made to enable a kind of one-stop shop. So, you know, I know this is really hard in a municipality. It's really hard to allocate staff to things when they're already busy. It's really hard to get a new job created. But, you know, the indication is that it's going to pay off in the long run, that you need to have experts that can sit with the large power users and help them work out what their needs are and help them to figure out how to meet those needs. And if you become the go-to person, then they will stay on your grid and on your network and remain, you know, a strong and supportive customer. I know when we spoke to a customer in one of the West Coast municipalities that run a big factory there, and they're the biggest employer in that area, and they said they really want to be a good customer. They want to work hand in hand with the municipality. You know, that's what they want, because they're, you know, their well-being is very much tied up in the well-being of that entire municipality. So find each other and put resources into that, I think, is an important message. And then, of course, that you can charge for that. It's not as though you just have to be, you know, saintly. Aisha was quite clear that you then charge a specialist fee. Where can you find all of the support? What is the support going forward? So we will have, and this will predominantly be Sinawa and Nick, but we will reach out to Josh and Shirley as we need. It's a kind of help desk. So as you finalize your draft policy or customize your billing tool, and I see Justine is already from Langebach has already reached out to Nick. You know, Nick and Sinawa will be around over the next 2 weeks. I think they've got Sinawa's around next week and on leave the week after that. Nick is on leave next week and around the week after that. So probably address your emails to both of them. But they will be there as a help desk. So please feel free to reach out to us as a faculty over the next 2 weeks before you submit those documents to us. Cogta, Doc Valentine and Candice Kambukle are on the call and have been around all week. They are supporting municipalities, particularly through the kind of getting the policies through council and approved by council. Their email addresses are here. These slides will be shared with you. And if you need their kind of support, they are a team who will provide that. I think they've got a broader team than the two of them, but Doc Valentine, thanks very much for that. Cogta is an important one-stop shop for the Munichs. And then Johanna Green Cape, they've got an energy sector desk, and I think we mentioned this earlier. They're not a direct facilitator for municipalities, but where you may have an industry that's really keen to wheel and you feel a little bit out of your depth, Green Cape can potentially step in and help facilitate some of your framework development where there is already an industry player that they would then be supporting. And then lastly, but by no means least, so those first three are sort of direct hands-on support, but where can you get all of the support templates and documents? And we've got a slide that's below this one that has got all the links in a sort of one-stop shop for you guys. But it's all on the SSEG website under the wheeling training. And then I just also included Eskom Distribution's website because Aisha presented quite a few very, very useful tools and support resources for you guys to take a look at, and that's a quick link to that site. So you've seen this slide over and over. You will now see that it's live linked. I'm very, very proud of myself. Nick did the uploading onto the website, but I did some live linking. He had to build my capacity to do it, but we've done it. So you can actually, you know, on this slide, you can actually click on every single sort of building block. It starts with the wheeling policy. There's the template policy document there. And then the support documents that will help guide you if you are completely lost. So the Salvia status document, the Cogta wheeling framework, and of course, critically, the NERSA rules themselves, which are very helpful. The application process Shirley took you through now. The application form is an annexure on the template policy. And then this kind of checklist is something that we develop now and we will finalize, and we will upload it as a second addendum to the template policy. So you'll find it You'll find it there when you go to download that in the next week or so. On the wheeling agreements, they're all live linked there. This is many thanks to the Western Cape government, which led on these agreements with Pegasus. And Johan pointed out that the more standardized the sector is, or the industry is, the easier it is, and the more de-risks it for industry. So those are the template agreements. Obviously, your legal department need to read over them, make whatever tweaks you need to make. But I think you can use these with the kind of strong assurance that they're already being used. They're what George has used. They're really what people are drawing on. So there's quite a lot of confidence there. In terms of, in the longer run, building wheeling into your cost of supply study, we've uploaded Ricardo's PowerPoint guideline on how to do that. And we're hoping, if we as Sustainable Energy Africa, if we should run some more cost of supply training workshops building on what we did earlier this year and last year and a couple of years before that, we will certainly also take people through this again in a bit more detail. You probably don't need to rush into it. It's more that longer run, getting an unbundled tariff with use of system charges, etc. But we need to start familiarizing ourselves with that. And then we've got the billing and metering. Sinao has been worked on this billing integration guideline for embedded gen and wheeling, and you can look at the tool there. And then Nick's tool is uploaded. I'm calling it Nick's tool. It's obviously drawing on lots of experience that went before, but it's a useful tool now for your billing. And as I said, he's added a pro forma sort of invoice or billing bill there for you guys as well. So it's pretty cool. And then lastly, but certainly not least, just some of the public facing information. So, you know, if you want to meet with your large power users, you know, you might start by saying, let's invite them to a session with us where we introduce the NERSA rules to them. We might have the introduction to wheeling video and let them go home with a color photocopy of the infographic on wheeling, or, you know, something like that. So there are some resources for that. It might also be that, you know, if you want to get something through council for approval, that you might want to start by showing them the introduction to wheeling video or something like that. So there's information there. And then not to forget that, of course, if a wheeling agreement involves embedded generation, the arrow takes you down to the sscg.org.za website, where there's all sorts of support there, and you can all join the SSCG WhatsApp group and be alerted to any training that's happening in that space in the future. But most of you are probably already part of that. So I think that takes us through all the support resources, and hopefully makes you feel very empowered to get on with doing it and to complete your policy within the next 2 weeks and share it with us. So that really does bring us to the end. We officially said we would finish at 1:30, so that provides a bit of time if anyone wants to say anything. But I think most importantly, please do fill out your Google form. That is going to be a requirement for the certification. And then once we've received all your documents and your final evaluation form, we will do that certification. You can expect to get that in early October. So within about 2 weeks' time, we should be able to issue that official a certificate of participation, but also the CPD points for those of you who need the CPD points. Not everybody does. Okay. Yeah, so certainly from my side, it's been really interesting. And we hope so for all of you. I'm not going to reiterate what Roy said. I think he put it really beautifully, and just the level of commitment from municipalities has been so high. And what I would be really proud of is if we can go back to NECOM in, say, 2 months' time, and based on evidence from you guys on a Google form, we can actually show them how many of you've got draft policies either approved or in, I know they won't be approved so quickly, but they might, or in the process of being submitted for approval. That would just, I think, be a really good reflection on the municipal distribution utility sector taking this very seriously and taking the regulatory rules to heart. Thanks to my fellow facilitator, Sinao, and Nick for all your organizing in the background, and of course Shirley and Josh, who are our core faculty, shall we say.